At 70 years old, I was found frozen on the sidewalk just 5 miles from the home I paid for. My body temperature had dropped so low that the paramedics could not find a pulse. But the cold that nearly killed me was not the winter storm raging outside. It was the ice in my daughter's voice when she looked at me and screamed that she did not need a sick father infecting her family. She slammed the door in my face, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart shattered by a lie. That night, while I lay dying in the snow, my son-in-law was celebrating his victory. He thought he had finally gotten rid of the old man. He thought he had won. But he made one fatal mistake. He forgot that before I was a retiree, I was a lieutenant in the fire department, and I know exactly how to survive when the heat rises. Before I tell you how I turned their world upside down, let me know which city you are tuning in from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that the truth always finds a way to the surface. My name is Grady Wilson. For 40 years I ran into burning buildings when everyone else was running out. I have carried grown men out of infernos and held children while the smoke cleared. I thought I knew what danger looked like. I thought I knew what fear felt like. But nothing prepared me for the terror of sitting in my own living room watching the people I loved turn into strangers. It was the height of the pandemic. The world was locked down. Fear was the currency of the day, and my son-in-law Connor was a rich man. The air in the house was stale, recycled through vents that had not been cleaned in months. Outside, the wind howled against the siding, a prelude to the blizzard the weathermen had been screaming about for days. Inside, the silence was worse. It was broken only by the dry, hacking cough of my 5-year-old grandson, Leo, coming from the upstairs bedroom. Every time the boy coughed, the tension in the living room tightened like a noose. I sat in my leather armchair, the one I had bought with my pension check 3 years ago. I was reading a book trying to make myself as small as possible. Since Kendra and Connor had moved in, or rather since I had let them take over the master bedroom, I had learned that my presence was an annoyance. I was the old furniture that did not match their modern aesthetic. The front door opened with a sharp click. Connor walked in. He looked like he was entering a hazmat zone. He wore a heavy N95 mask, clear protective goggles, and blue latex gloves. He did not say hello. He did not take off his coat. He marched straight into the living room, his eyes fixed on me with a look of triumph that he tried to disguise as panic. Kendra came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face was pale, dark circles carved under her eyes from nights spent worrying about the virus. She looked at Connor, waiting for news, waiting for him to tell us that the grocery run was safe, that the world was getting better. Instead, Connor threw a stack of photographs onto the glass coffee table. They hit the surface with a slap that echoed off the walls. "You need to look at these, Kendra," Connor said, his voice muffled by the mask but loud enough to cut through the room. I looked down. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance, but the subject was clear enough. It was a tall, broad-shouldered African-American man wearing a coat just like mine. He was walking into a building with blacked-out windows. Above the door, a neon sign flickered. It was a known underground gambling den, the kind of place police raided twice a month. Kendra picked up a photo, her hands trembling. "What is this, Connor?" "This is where your father went this morning," Connor said, pointing a gloved finger at me. "He did not go to the pharmacy, Kendra. He went to gamble. He went into a room full of people. No masks, no ventilation, sharing cards and chips. He went there and then he came back here to this house, to our son." I set my book down slowly. The accusation was so absurd, so calculated, that for a moment I could not speak. I felt the blood rush to my ears. "That is a lie," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I went to the pharmacy on 4th Street. I needed my heart medication. The line was long. I waited outside. Connor laughed, a harsh barking sound. "The pharmacy. Really? Then explain this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He tossed it next to the photos. It was a receipt. Not from a pharmacy, but a handwritten slip with a timestamp from 2 hours ago detailing a $500 loss at the very gambling den in the pictures. I stood up. My knees popped. I am 68 years old, but I am still strong. I towered over Connor, but he did not back down. He knew he had the upper hand because he had the audience he wanted. "I have never stepped foot in that place," I said, looking directly at Kendra. "Kendra, look at me. You know I do not gamble. I promised your mother on her deathbed I would never touch a card again." Kendra looked at the receipt, then at the photos, and finally at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Dad, The receipt has "today is date." It has your initials on it. It is a forgery, I stated flatly. Where is my medicine, Connor? If I went to the pharmacy, I would have my pills. Connor threw his hands up. I checked his coat pockets when I came in, Kendra. I found these. He pulled a pack of cheap cigarettes out of his pocket and slammed them onto the table. I do not smoke. I have not smoked in 30 years, but there they were sitting next to the damning photos. He traded your safety for a game of poker and a pack of smokes, Connor spat. And now listen to your son. As if on cue, Leo coughed again from upstairs. This time it was a long, rattling sound that ended in a whimper. The sound seemed to physically strike Kendra. She flinched, dropping the photograph as if it burned her skin. Connor moved in for the kill. I checked Leo's temperature before I came down. It is 102. He has a fever, Kendra. Your father brought the virus into this house. He is patient 0. He is the reason our son is sick. The air left the room. I looked at my daughter, the girl I had raised, the girl I had taught to ride a bike, the girl I had comforted when her first boyfriend broke her heart. I looked for a flicker of trust. I looked for the daughter who knew her father was a man of honor. But fear is a powerful drug, and Connor had just given her an overdose. Dad, Kendra whispered, stepping back from me. She pulled her shirt up over her nose and mouth, creating a makeshift barrier. Did you really go there? I took a step toward her, reaching out a hand. Kendra, please, think. Why would I do that? I love that boy more than my own life. I went to get my heart pills. Connor is lying. Stop lying, Connor roared. He stepped between us, acting the role of the protective patriarch. He pushed me back. His shove was weak, but I stumbled. I was dizzy not from the push, but from the sheer magnitude of the betrayal happening in front of me. Stop getting close to her, Connor yelled. You are contaminated. You are a walking biohazard. You want to kill her too. I looked at the table again. The photos were blurry. The man was wearing a coat like mine, a hat like mine. But I knew it was not me. And Connor knew it was not me. I looked into his eyes above the mask. They were cold, calculating. There was no anger in them, only satisfaction. He had been planning this. He needed me out. He wanted the house to himself. He wanted the control. This is my house, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. I bought this house in 1980. My name is on the deed. Not anymore, Connor sneered. You signed the transfer papers 3 years ago when Margaret died. You said you wanted Kendra to feel secure. Well, now she needs security from you. Kendra was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. She was not looking at me anymore. She was looking at the stairs, thinking about her son. Dad, she sobbed, if Leo is sick, if you brought this here. I did not, Kendra. I shouted, my control finally snapping. I would never hurt him. Then explain the pictures. Explain the receipt, she screamed back, her voice cracking. Explain why my son is burning up with a fever while you were out playing games. I stood there, surrounded by the walls I had painted, standing on the floorboards I had refinished with my own hands. I was completely alone. The man in the mask had woven a narrative so tight, so terrifying that the truth did not matter. Facts did not matter. Only the fear mattered. Connor turned to Kendra, his voice dropping to a soothing, manipulative whisper. Honey, we cannot take the risk. If he stays here tonight, we are all exposed. The viral load, it is too high. We have to protect Leo. Kendra looked up at me. Her eyes were hard now. The fear had turned into anger. It is a survival instinct. When a mother thinks her child is threatened, she destroys the threat. And in that moment, I was the threat. Get out, she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. What I asked, get out, Dad. I do not care where you go, but you cannot stay here. Not with Leo sick. Kendra, it is a blizzard out there, I said, pointing to the window where the snow was piling up against the glass. I have nowhere to go. Everything is closed. I do not care, she screamed. I do not need a sick father killing my family. Get out. Connor did not wait. He grabbed my arm. I pulled away, ready to strike him, ready to fight for my place in my own home. But then I looked at Kendra. She was backing away from me, revulsion on her face. If I fought him, if I laid a hand on him, I would only prove his point. I would be the violent, irrational old man he was painting me to be. I straightened my jacket. I did not look at Connor. I looked straight at my daughter. You are making a mistake, Kendra. A mistake you will not be able to fix. Just go, she wept, turning her back on me. Connor smirked behind his mask. He marched to the front door and threw it open. The wind roared into the house, carrying snowflakes that bit like needles. The temperature dropped instantly. I walked to the door. I did not look back at the photos. I did not look back at the fake cigarettes. I stepped out onto the porch. "Give me my keys," Connor said. I reached into my pocket, but he snatched them from my hand before I could offer them. "And the phone," he added. "It is contaminated. I will sanitize it and leave it on the porch tomorrow." He reached into my other pocket and took my cell phone. He took my wallet from the inside pocket of my coat. "I need my ID, Connor. I need my money." I said, the cold already starting to seep through my thin indoor clothes. "It is all covered in germs, old man," he said. "You can have it back when you test negative, if you survive that long." He slammed the door. The sound was final. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I heard the chain rattle. I stood on the porch of the house I had built. I was 68 years old. I had no phone. I had no money. I had no medication for my heart condition. And the temperature was dropping past 10 degrees below zero. The wind howled around me, a white curtain of death closing in. I wrapped my arms around myself and looked at the closed door. I could see the warm glow of the lights inside. I could see Connor's shadow moving across the window. I stepped off the porch and into the snow. It was up to my shins. My dress shoes were soaked instantly. I had to keep moving. If I stopped, I would die. And I refused to die. Not like this. Not for a lie. I turned my face into the wind and started walking. I did not know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I was going to survive this night, and when the sun came up, there would be a reckoning. The wind outside was a living thing screaming against the siding of the house I had built with my own hands 40 years ago. But the storm inside was far more violent. Connor did not just ask me to leave. He initiated an eviction protocol that he must have rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. He moved with a terrifying efficiency. He grabbed my vintage leather suitcase from the hallway closet. It was the same suitcase I had carried when I traveled to receive my Medal for Valor from the fire department. Now it was being treated like a garbage bag. Connor marched into the guest room, which used to be my study, and began sweeping my belongings off the dresser with his gloved arm. My reading glasses, my blood pressure monitor, and the framed photo of my late wife, Lucille, clattered into the open suitcase. The glass on the frame cracked. I heard the sound distinct and sharp. It sounded like a bone breaking. I stepped forward to stop him, but he held up a hand. "Stay back," he barked. "Do not come any closer. I am doing this for your daughter. I am packing your essentials." He was not packing. He was purging. He grabbed handfuls of my clothes from the closet hangers. He did not fold them. He jammed them into the leather bag until the seams groaned. A wool sweater sleeve hung out of the side like a dead limb. He zipped it shut, catching the fabric, not caring if he tore it. I looked at Kendra. She was standing by the kitchen island. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the marble countertop. She was trembling. Not from the cold, but from the conflict. She looked at Connor and then she looked at the floor. She could not look at me. Connor dragged the suitcase to the front door. He opened it, and without a second of hesitation, he heaved the bag out into the darkness. It landed with a dull thud in a snowbank. The snow was already a foot deep and rising. The black leather disappeared instantly into the white void. "Now for the rest," Connor said, turning back to me. He reached for my coat, which was hanging on the rack. He threw it at me. It hit me in the chest. I caught it instinctively. "Put it on," he ordered, "and give me the phone." I held my cell phone tight in my hand. It was an old model, but it was my lifeline. It had the numbers of my old crew from the fire station. It had the photos of Leo taking his first steps. It was the only way I could call for a taxi or a hotel or help. "I am not giving you my phone, Connor," I said. My voice was low. It was the voice I used when a rookie firefighter was about to make a fatal error. "It is a vector for transmission," Connor said, stepping closer. His eyes above the mask were manic. "You have been breathing on it. You have been touching it with your gambling hands. It stays here. I will sanitize it. I will leave it on the porch in 24 hours once the viral load has died down." He lunged for it. I am a strong man, but I was caught off guard by his ferocity. He snatched the device from my grip. His latex gloves gave him a friction advantage. I reached to grab it back, but he danced away, holding it up like a trophy. "And the wallet," he said. "No," I roared. "Yes," he countered. "Cash is the dirtiest thing on the planet. You are not taking contaminated bills out of this house and bringing them back. Hand it over, or I call the police and tell them you are assaulting us." Do you think they will believe the angry black man or the concerned father protecting his sick child? The threat hung in the air. It was a weaponized reality. I knew the statistics. I knew how that call would end. Slowly, with my eyes burning into his, I took my wallet out of my back pocket. I threw it on the floor at his feet. "Sanitize that," I said. Connor kicked the wallet aside. Good. Now get out. I walked to the open door. The cold hit me like a physical blow. It was 10 degrees below zero, and the wind chill made it feel like 40 below. My breath plumed out in front of me in thick white clouds. I stopped at the threshold. I placed my hand on the doorframe. My fingers gripped the wood. I refused to be swept out like dust. I turned my head to look at my daughter one last time. Kendra. I called out. She did not move. She was staring at the wall. Kendra. Look at me, I commanded. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like a child who had lost her way. You are watching him do this, I said. You are watching him throw your father into a blizzard without a phone or money. Do you understand what is happening here? He is protecting Leo, she whispered. Her voice was so small I could barely hear it over the howling wind. He is stealing your house, I said. I built this shelter for you. I paid for every brick. I kept you warm when the furnace broke in '92. I worked double shifts to put that roof over your head, and now you are letting him push me out from under it. It is just for a few days, Dad, she said, tears spilling over her mask. Just until you test negative. Just until Leo is better. I shook my head slowly. The cold air was biting at my exposed neck, but the chill in my heart was colder. This is not about a virus, Kendra. Open your eyes. He has no money. He has debts. He needs me gone so he can sell this place. If you close this door now, you are sealing your own fate. That is enough, Connor shouted. He moved to push me. I planted my feet. I did not budge. I ignored him completely. My eyes were locked on hers. Kendra, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. If you let him close this door, you are making the biggest mistake of your life. You are choosing a liar over the man who loved you since before you took your first breath. Kendra took a step forward. For a second, I saw a flicker of the daughter I knew, the daughter who used to wait up for me when I came home from a night shift. She opened her mouth to speak. She looked at Connor. Then she looked at the stairs where her son was sleeping. The fear won. The manipulation won. Her face hardened. The softness vanished. My mistake was inviting you to live here, she said. Her voice was flat and dead. I wanted a father for my son. Instead, I got a burden. Go away, Dad. Just go away. The words were a physical impact. It felt as if she had taken the fire axe from my truck and swung it directly into my chest. I released my grip on the doorframe. There was nothing left to hold on to. The foundation of my life had just crumbled. I stepped out onto the porch. The concrete was covered in a layer of ice. My dress shoes slipped, but I caught my balance. I would not give Connor the satisfaction of seeing me fall. Connor leaned out. He did not look at me. He looked past me at the dark, empty street. Do not come back until I call you, he said. He grabbed the handle of the heavy oak door, the door I had sanded and stained myself. He pulled it shut. The sound was heavy and final. Thud. Then came the sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The metallic slide of the deadbolt. Click. Then the chain lock. Rattle. Snap. I was outside. The transition was instant and brutal. 1 second I was in the home I had owned for 3 decades, smelling the faint scent of lemon polish and dinner cooking. The next second I was in a frozen hell. The wind tore at my thin indoor clothes. I was wearing a cardigan and slacks. My coat was unbuttoned and I struggled to fasten it with freezing fingers. The buttons felt like ice cubes. I looked down at the snowbank. My suitcase was half buried. I waded into the drift. The snow went over my ankles and seeped into my socks. It burned like acid. I grabbed the handle of the suitcase and dragged it onto the plowed driveway. I stood there for a moment under the yellow glow of the street lamp. I looked back at the house. The living room curtains were drawn shut. I saw a shadow move. Then the porch light flickered and went out. They had turned off the light. I was in total darkness. The street was empty. The entire neighborhood was hunkered down for the storm. No cars passed. No lights were on in the neighbors' houses. It was just me and the wind. My heart began to race, not from exertion, but from the realization of my predicament. I had no phone to call a cab. I had no wallet to pay for a room. The nearest hotel was 5 miles away. The police station was 4 miles in the other direction. The temperature was dropping. I checked my pockets again, hoping for a miracle. Nothing. Just lint and a single peppermint candy I had picked up from a restaurant weeks ago. I looked at my hands. They were already turning a pale, ashy gray in the cold. I knew the stages of hypothermia. I had treated victims of it. First comes the shivering, then the confusion, then the lethargy, and finally the sleep you never wake up from. I had about 2 hours before my body shut down. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. It was heavy, filled with the debris of my life. I started to walk. The wheels of the suitcase would not roll in the snow, so I had to drag it. It left a long furrow behind me like a scar in the earth. I did not look back at the house again. That house was a tomb now. It held the corpses of the people I used to know. The man walking away was not a father anymore. He was a survivor, and survivors do not look back. They put one foot in front of the other, left foot, right foot, breathe. The wind screamed in my ears, mocking me. It told me I was old. It told me I was weak. It told me to lie down and rest, but I had fire in my blood. I gritted my teeth against the pain in my chest. I thought about the lie Connor had told. I thought about the fear in Kendra's eyes, and I made a silent vow to the frozen night. I will not die here. I will live, and when I return, I will bring a storm that makes this blizzard look like a spring breeze. I turned the corner at the end of the block and disappeared into the whiteout. The snow erased my footprints as soon as I made them, leaving no trace that Grady Wilson had ever been there at all. The wind was no longer just air moving through space. It was a physical weapon. It felt like 1,000 razor blades slicing through the thin cotton of my cardigan. My dress shoes, which were designed for Sunday services and family dinners, were useless against the accumulation of ice on the pavement. Every step sent a shockwave of pain shooting up my shins, but after the first mile the pain began to fade. That was worse. The pain meant my nerves were still alive. The numbness that replaced it was the first sign that my body was beginning to surrender. I walked with my head down, chin tucked into my chest, trying to preserve whatever heat remained in my core. I am a man who spent 30 years walking into infernos. I know heat. I know the feeling of sweat boiling on your skin inside a turnout coat. I know the sensation of lungs burning from smoke and the roar of a fire that wants to consume everything in its path. I fought those fires for a living. I fought them to pay for the house behind me. I fought them to pay for Kendra Represent's piano lessons, her college tuition, and her wedding dress. I remembered a specific fire in 1998. It was a warehouse down by the docks. The heat was so intense it melted the visor on my helmet. I had worked a double shift that day because Kendra wanted a specific bicycle for her birthday. I was exhausted, dehydrated, and terrified, but I stayed on the line holding the hose until the structure was clear. I did it for her. Every blister on my hands, every scar on my back was a deposit into her future. I thought I was building a foundation that would never crack. But fire is honest. Fire tells you it wants to kill you. It roars. It glows. It gives you a chance to run. The cold is different. The cold is a liar. It creeps in silently. It tells you that you are just tired. It tells you that the snow looks soft like a blanket. It whispers that it would be so easy to just sit down for a minute and close your eyes. I looked at my hands. They were stiff claws frozen in the shape of gripping the suitcase handle. The skin was a pale, waxy gray. I tried to wiggle my fingers, but nothing happened. The connection between my brain and my extremities had been severed. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. The moisture in my nose had frozen, making every inhale feel like I was snorting broken glass. My heart, which had been beating with the rhythm of rage for the first hour, began to slow down. The adrenaline was gone. The anger was freezing over, replaced by a profound sorrow. I was 68 years old. I had served my country. I had served my city. I had loved my family. And now I was walking alone in a blizzard, discarded like a bag of trash because a man who never worked a hard day in his life wanted to cash in my legacy. I tried to summon the image of Kendra as a little girl to keep me moving. I tried to remember her smile when I taught her to ride that bicycle. But every time I pictured her face, it morphed into the cold, dead stare she gave me at the door. I pushed the thought away. If I thought about her betrayal, I would stop walking. And if I stopped walking, I would die. I had to focus on the rhythm. Left foot, drag the suitcase. Right foot, drag the suitcase. The streetlights began to blur. The world was losing its sharp edges. The white snow and the black sky were blending into a single gray tunnel. I knew where I was, or at least I knew where I was trying to go. The old 4th Precinct station was just a few blocks away. It had been closed down 2 years ago due to budget cuts, but in my mind it was still a sanctuary. It was where I used to stop for coffee with the officers after a night shift. It was a place of brotherhood. As I turned the corner, the wind hit me with renewed force, knocking me sideways. I stumbled, my knees buckling. I caught myself on a lamppost, the metal stinging my cheek. That was when I saw her. Standing at the end of the block, right in front of the boarded-up doors of the police station, was a figure. She was wearing a yellow sundress, the one she wore to our anniversary picnic 10 years ago. She was not wearing a coat. The snow was falling around her, but it did not seem to touch her. Lucille, my wife, my late wife who had been gone for 3 years. She looked exactly as she did the day before the cancer took her vitality. She was smiling that warm, patient smile that used to greet me when I came home smelling of smoke and soot. She lifted her hand and waved. "Grady," she seemed to say, though I could not hear her voice over the wind. "Come here, Grady. It is warm here." I knew it was a hallucination. Part of my brain, the part that was still a trained first responder, screamed that this was the end stage. Paradoxical undressing would be next. The brain misfires, telling the body it is overheating when it is actually freezing to death. I knew she was not there, but God, I wanted her to be. I tried to run toward her. I wanted to tell her what they did to us. I wanted to tell her that I failed to protect the house. I wanted to tell her that our daughter had forgotten who we were. I took one step, then another. My legs felt heavy as if they were made of lead. The suitcase slipped from my frozen fingers. I did not try to pick it up. I left my life behind in the snow. I just wanted to reach her. I reached the steps of the precinct. Lucille was just a few feet away. I reached out my hand to touch her face, to feel the warmth of her skin. My hand passed through empty air. The yellow dress dissolved into swirling snow. The warm smile faded into the graffiti-covered brick wall of the abandoned station. I was alone. The realization broke the last of my strength. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the concrete steps. The snow was piled high here, drifting against the doors. It felt strangely soft. The biting cold was replaced by a dull, heavy comfort. I curled onto my side, pulling my knees to my chest. I am just going to rest my eyes, I thought. Just for a minute. Then I will get up and find a phone. Just 1 minute. The darkness began to close in from the edges of my vision. It was not scary. It was peaceful. The roar of the wind faded into a gentle hum. I closed my eyes. A light cut through the darkness. It was not the soft light of heaven. It was harsh, blue and red, strobing, rotating. I heard the crunch of tires on snow. Heavy tires, chains rattling. Then a car door opening. Footsteps. Fast, heavy footsteps crunching toward me. "Holy Mother of God," a voice shouted. It was a deep voice, rough with panic. I felt hands on me, warm hands. They were touching my neck, feeling for a pulse that was barely there. "Dispatch. I have a 1054 at the old 4th Precinct." The voice crackled. It sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Male African-American 60s, unconscious, severe hypothermia. Send the ambulance now." Now I tried to open my eyes. A face hovered above me. It was illuminated by the flashing lights of the patrol car. A white man, middle-aged, a thick mustache. He looked familiar. "Come on, buddy. Stay with me," the officer said. He was rubbing my chest, trying to generate friction. "Do not you dare quit on me." He leaned closer, and the beam of his flashlight hit my face. He stopped rubbing. He froze. "Lieutenant Wilson," he whispered. I blinked. The name sounded like it belonged to someone else. "It is Miller," the officer said, his voice choking up. "It is Sergeant Miller. You pulled me out of the dumpster fire behind the chemical plant in 2001. Lieutenant, can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my jaw was frozen shut. Miller ripped off his own heavy patrol jacket and wrapped it around me. He pulled me into a sitting position, hugging me to his chest to share his body heat. "Hang on, Lieutenant. Help is coming. You are going to be okay." The siren of the ambulance wailed in the distance, getting louder. I felt myself being lifted, not by angels, but by men. They put me on a stretcher. The back of the ambulance was bright and smelled of antiseptic. They cut my clothes off. They wrapped me in heated blankets. They put an oxygen mask over my face. The heat was painful. It felt like needles were being driven back into my skin. I heard the paramedic talking to Miller. "We need to notify next of kin," the paramedic said, holding a clipboard. "He has no ID. "Do you know him, Sergeant? Does he have family?" Miller looked at me. He looked at the frostbite on my fingers. He looked at the way I had been found curled up like a stray dog on the steps of a closed building in the middle of a blizzard. Lieutenant Miller said gently, leaning over the stretcher, "We need to call someone. Who do we call your daughter, Kendra?" "She still lives on Oak Street, right?" The name Kendra sparked a final surge of clarity in my freezing brain. I saw the door closing. I saw the lock sliding shut. I saw the look in her eyes. I reached up and pulled the oxygen mask down an inch. My lips cracked and bled. My voice was a whisper, dry as dead leaves, but it was steady. "No," I rasped. Miller looked confused. "No, we have to tell them you are alive." I looked straight up into the sterile lights of the ambulance. I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. I killed the father I used to be so the survivor could live. "I have no children," I said. Miller stared at me. "But Lieutenant, I have no family," I repeated, closing my eyes. "I am alone." The doors of the ambulance slammed shut, sealing me in with the warmth. The siren wailed again, announcing to the world that Grady Wilson was alive, but the man who was Kendra's father had died on that sidewalk. They say freezing to death is like falling asleep. That is a lie told by people who have never felt their own blood turn into slush. The dying part might be quiet, but the coming back is a violent war. My return to the living was not a gentle awakening. It was an explosion of agony. The doctors at the county hospital were using an external rewarming machine to cycle my blood. It felt like they were pumping liquid fire through my veins. Every nerve ending that had gone dormant in the snow was now screaming as it woke up. My body shook so hard that the metal railings of the gurney rattled against the frame. I could hear voices above me, but they were distorted. Code blue in Trauma 1. "Get the pads. Clear." A jolt of electricity slammed into my chest. My heart, which had been fluttering like a dying moth, seized and then hammered against my ribs. I gasped, sucking in air that smelled of rubbing alcohol and burnt ozone. "Cut the clothes off," a doctor ordered. "We need access to the femoral artery." I felt the cold steel of trauma shears slicing through my layers. They cut through the cardigan Kendra gave me for Christmas 5 years ago. They cut through the thermal undershirt. Then they reached my heavy wool trousers. As the nurse sliced through the hem of my coat, the one I had worn for 20 winters, something hard clattered onto the linoleum floor. It made a sharp, metallic sound that cut through the chaos of the emergency room. "Hold on," the nurse said. "What is this?" She bent down and picked up a small silver object. It was a USB drive. I had sewn it into the lining of my coat 3 months ago when I first started noticing money disappearing from my bank account. It was my insurance policy. It contained every digital footprint Connor had tried to erase. It held the truth about the online gambling accounts linked to his IP address. It held the chat logs where he bragged to his friends about waiting for the old man to kick the bucket. "Put it in the biohazard bag with his effects," the doctor snapped. "Focus on the patient." We are losing his pressure. I wanted to reach out and grab it. I wanted to tell them that the little silver stick was worth more than my life. It was my honor. But my arms were strapped down and my mouth was full of plastic tubing. I could only watch as the nurse dropped the drive into a clear plastic bag and tossed it onto a counter far out of my reach. I drifted back into the darkness, but this time it was not the sleep of the frozen. It was the exhausted collapse of a soldier who had just survived the first wave of an ambush. While my blood was boiling in my veins 5 miles away, Connor was pouring himself a glass of my best scotch. He stood in the living room of the house I built and looked out at the blizzard. He did not look for me. He looked at the storm like it was his accomplice. He took a sip of the 18-year-old single malt bottle I had been saving for Leo graduation and pulled out his phone. He did not call the police. He did not call the hospitals to see if an old man had been found. He dialed a number he had saved under the name Cash Buyer. "It is done," Connor said into the phone. "The property is vacant. No, there are no tenants. The old man who lived here has moved on." He listened for a moment, nodding to himself. "I want it listed by morning. I know the market is tough, but this is a prime location. 4 bedrooms, hardwood floors, finished basement. I want a quick sale. Cash only. I am willing to go 20% under market value if we can close in a week." He hung up and smiled. He was already spending the money in his head. He walked into the kitchen where Kendra was standing by the sink. She was staring at the empty coffee pot. For 3 years I had made the coffee every single morning. I would have it ready when she came down with a splash of hazelnut creamer just the way she liked it. Now the pot was cold and empty. "There is no milk," Kendra said softly. She opened the refrigerator. "Dad always makes sure there is milk for Leo." Connor walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, playing the part of the supportive husband perfectly. "We will get more milk tomorrow, babe," he whispered. "Do not worry about the small stuff. We are safe now. That is what matters. The risk is gone." Kendra leaned back against him, but her body was stiff. "Who is going to shovel the driveway?" she asked. "Dad always does it before I have to leave for work." "I will hire someone," Connor said, tightening his grip slightly. "You have to stop thinking like a dependent child, Kendra. We are the adults now. Your father was dragging us down. He was a hazard to Leo. You did the right thing. You protected your cub." Kendra closed the refrigerator door. The kitchen felt huge and hollow. The silence that used to be filled with my humming or the sound of me tinkering with the toaster was now heavy and oppressive. "He looked so cold, Connor," she whispered. "Maybe we should call the police station, just to make sure he found a shelter." Connor spun her around, gripping her shoulders. His eyes were intense. "No," he said firmly. "If you call, they will bring him back. Do you want that? Do you want the virus back in this house? Do you want Leo to wake up with a fever again? We have to be strong. We have to let him go. He is a grown man. He can take care of himself." He kissed her forehead, effectively silencing her conscience with fear. Kendra nodded slowly. She went upstairs to check on Leo, leaving Connor alone in the kitchen. He took another sip of my scotch and toasted the empty room. "Goodbye, Grady," he whispered. I woke up to the sound of a heart monitor beeping. It was a steady rhythmic sound that told me I was still in the game. The room was dim. I was buried under 3 heavy blankets. My skin felt raw and sensitive, like I had a severe sunburn all over my body. I tried to move my hand and found that I could. The paralysis was gone. I turned my head. Sitting in a plastic chair next to my bed was Sergeant Miller. He was still wearing his uniform, but his hat was in his lap. He looked tired. His eyes were red-rimmed. When he saw me move, he sat up straight. "Lieutenant," he said, "you are back." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry as sandpaper. Miller poured a cup of water and held the straw to my lips. I drank greedily. "You have been out for 6 hours," Miller said. "The doctors say you are a miracle. Your core temp was down to 80 degrees. Most men do not come back from that." I looked at him. I saw the question in his eyes. I saw the pity. "Did you call her?" I asked. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. Miller shook his head. "Not yet. You said no family. But Grady, I cannot keep this off the books forever. You are a Jane Doe right now. But once I file the report, Kendra is going to know." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I thought about the look on Connor's face. I thought about the receipt. I thought about the USB drive in the biohazard bag. If I went back now, what would happen? It would be my word against his. He would say I was senile. He would say the cold damaged my brain. He would manipulate Kendra again. I would be the sick old man who needed to be institutionalized. I would lose everything. But if I was dead, I was invisible. And an invisible man can go places a living man cannot. "Where is my coat?" I asked. "They cut it off you," Miller said. "But I grabbed your personal effects." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the plastic bag containing the USB drive. He held it up. The light from the hallway reflected off the silver casing. "You were guarding this with your life," Miller said. "When you were delirious, you kept trying to reach for it. What is on this drive, Lieutenant?" I looked at the drive. It was the key to my vindication. But it was not enough. I needed more. I needed to see him trade the money. I needed to catch him in the act of selling my home. "Miller," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "you owe me. You owe me for that dumpster fire in 2001. You owe me for pulling you out before the roof collapsed." Miller nodded solemnly. "I know I do. I would be dead if not for you." "Name it." "Don't file the report," I said. Miller frowned. "What?" "Make the report say John Doe died of cardiac arrest," I said. "Let the hospital bury a pauper." "Grady, that is fraud. That is crazy. Why would you do that?" "Because a dead man can listen," I said, pushing myself up on my elbows despite the pain. Because if I go back there now, I lose my daughter forever. That man in her house is a cancer. He has infected her mind. If I want to save her, I have to cut him out. And to catch a predator like him, I need him to think the prey is dead." Miller looked at the USB drive in his hand. He looked at the determination in my face. He was a cop, but he was a man of loyalty first. He knew Connor. He had seen the type before. The smooth talkers who destroyed lives from the inside out. He sighed and put the drive into my hand. It felt cold and heavy. "If I do this, there is no going back," Miller warned. "You will be a ghost. No pension, no social security, no identity until you choose to reveal yourself." I closed my fist around the drive. I am already a ghost, Miller. My daughter looked right through me last night. Now help me haunt the man who did this. Miller stood up. He put his hat on his head. He adjusted his belt. "I will tell the nurse to keep the file anonymous," he said. "And I have a safe house you can use. It is my fishing cabin up by the lake. It has internet." I nodded. It was a start. "One more thing," I said. "I need you to get into my house." Miller raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a warrant?" "No," I said. "But I have the code to the back door security panel, and I know where the cameras are." I gave him the code. It was Kendra's birthday. "Go to the server in the basement," I instructed. "Link the feed to your laptop. I want to see everything. I want to see him celebrate. I want to see him sign the papers. And when he thinks he has won, I want to be the one watching him fall." Miller nodded and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "Rest up, Lieutenant," he said. "The forecast says the storm is breaking tomorrow." I looked out the window at the swirling snow. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "The storm is just beginning." The morning after the blizzard, the sun came out, but it brought no warmth to the house on Oak Street. I was not there to feel the chill, but thanks to the surveillance system I had installed years ago, I saw everything. I saw the moment Connor realized that stealing a man represents life work is not as easy as changing the locks. At 10 in the morning, a real estate agent named Sarah Jenkins arrived. She was a shark in a pantsuit, the kind of woman who could smell desperation from the sidewalk. Connor welcomed her in with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He poured her coffee in my favorite mug. They sat at the kitchen table, spread out with the deed to my house. "This is a beautiful property," Sarah said, tapping her pen on the document. "In this market, with the inventory so low, we could get a bidding war started by noon. I have cash buyers lined up who do not care about inspections." Connor leaned back, practically drooling at the thought of the money. "Excellent. Let us list it for $600,000. I want a quick close." Sarah nodded, but then she frowned. She adjusted her glasses and leaned closer to the paperwork. She flipped a page. Then she flipped back. The silence in the kitchen stretched tight. "Is there a problem?" Connor asked, his smile faltering. "Mr. Vance," Sarah said slowly, "I cannot list this house." Connor laughed nervously. "What do you mean? The deed is in Kendra represents name. My wife owns this house." "Technically, yes," Sarah said. "But look here. Section 4, paragraph 2. There is a life estate clause attached to the title." Connor snatched the paper. "What is a life estate?" "It means that while Kendra holds the future interest, her father, Grady Wilson, retains the exclusive right to live in and possess the property until his death." Sarah looked at Connor with cold professional eyes. "You cannot sell this house, rent it, or even renovate it without his written permission. And more importantly, you cannot evict him. If you kicked him out, you broke the law." Connor represents face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "He is gone," Connor shouted. He left voluntarily. "It does not matter," Sarah said, gathering her things. "Unless you have a death certificate or a signed release of the life estate from Mr. Wilson himself, this house is unsellable. It is dead weight." She walked out. The moment the door closed, Connor exploded. He did not just get angry, he went feral. He swept my mug off the table, shattering it against the wall. He marched into the living room and kicked my leather armchair. He was a trapped rat, and he knew it. He had debts to pay, and his golden ticket had just turned into a worthless piece of paper. He needed me dead, or he needed me to sign. And since he did not know where I was, he decided to find a way to make me sign without me ever picking up a pen. He stormed into my bedroom. The room he had tossed the night before was still a mess, but now he was looking for something specific. He needed a sample of my handwriting. He needed my seal. He ripped the drawers out of my desk. He dumped boxes of my old tax returns onto the floor. He was looking for a way to commit a felony, but instead he found the truth about his own life. Buried at the bottom of my cedar chest, wrapped in an old flannel shirt, was a red ledger. It was my private book of accounts. I am a man who writes things down. I believe that numbers do not lie. Connor saw the book and grabbed it. He flipped through the pages, looking for a signature to copy. His eyes scanned the columns of numbers: mortgage payments, utility bills, grocery costs. Then he stopped. He froze. His finger traced an entry from 2 years ago. The date was November 14th. The entry read simply, "Payment to Sal the butcher, $50,000. Reason Connor represents gambling debt to save his life." I watched on the camera feed as the memory washed over him. 2 years ago, Connor had come to me weeping. He had borrowed money from a loan shark and lost it all on a rigged boxing match. They were going to break his legs. No, they were going to kill him. He begged me not to tell Kendra. He begged me for help. I took the money from my retirement fund. I drove to a warehouse in the middle of the night and handed a bag of cash to a man with a scarred face. I bought Connor Represents Life that night. I never told Kendra. I never held it over his head. I just wrote it down. Connor stared at the entry. For a second, I thought I saw shame. I thought I saw a flicker of human decency. He was standing in the room of the man who had saved him, the man he had just thrown into a blizzard. But I was wrong. Connor did not feel shame. He felt hatred. He hated me because I knew his secret. He hated me because I was the witness to his weakness. He growled low in his throat. He ripped the page out of the ledger. Then he ripped another. He grabbed the whole book and tore it in half with a strength born of pure malice. He threw the pieces into the trash can and spat on them. "You think you are a saint, old man," he muttered to the empty room. "You think you own me? You own nothing." He did not want my forgiveness. He wanted to erase me. He resumed his search, more frantic now. He found an old lease agreement with my signature at the bottom. He held it up to the light. A cruel smile spread across his face. "I have it," he whispered. He pulled out his phone again. He did not call a lawyer. He called a number that was not in his contacts list. He dialed it from memory. It was a number for a man named Silas, a former inmate I had once tried to help get back on his feet, but who had chosen a different path. Silas was an artist, but his canvas was government documents. "I need a rush job," Connor said into the phone, "a life estate release form. I have the signature sample. I need it to look like it was signed yesterday. Yes, I have the cash." He listened for a moment, his eyes darting around the room to make sure he was alone. $5,000 fine. Meet me at the docks in an hour. And Silas, bring the notary stamp, the one with the backdated seal. He hung up. The transformation was complete. Connor was no longer just a bad son-in-law. He was a criminal. He had crossed the line from moral bankruptcy to legal fraud. He grabbed his coat and the sample of my signature. He walked out of my room, leaving the torn pieces of the ledger in the trash. The evidence of my mercy was destroyed, replaced by the tools of his treachery. I lay in my hospital bed watching the footage on Miller Represents laptop. My chest hurt, but it was not my heart condition. It was the pain of knowing that the money I spent to save his life was now being used to destroy mine. "Let him go," I told Miller. "Let him sign the papers." Miller looked at me like I was crazy. "Grady, that is forgery. If he signs that he sells your house." "No," I said, closing the laptop. "If he signs that he signs his own arrest warrant, let him think he has won. Let him think the devil is on his side. Because when I come back, I am going to show him that even the devil answers to the fire." Connor left the house. I watched his car pull out of the driveway. He was driving toward the docks to sell his soul. I lay back on the pillows and waited. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The morning sun that streamed through the windows of the house on Oak Street should have been a blessing, but for Connor Vance, it was a spotlight on his lies. The blizzard had passed, and with it the fever that had allegedly threatened the life of my grandson Leo. Children are resilient creatures. Their bodies fight off infections with a speed that defies medical textbooks. By 10 in the morning, Leo was not shivering in bed or coughing up his lungs as Connor had predicted. He was downstairs in the living room, building a fortress out of sofa cushions and laughing as he threw a foam ball at the television. Kendra stood in the doorway holding a cup of tea and watching her son. The dark circles under her eyes from the previous night were still there, but now they were accompanied by a furrow of confusion on her brow. She had just kicked her 68-year-old father out into a deadly storm because her husband claimed he had brought a plague into the house. She had sacrificed her relationship with me to save her child, but the child she saved looked perfectly healthy. I do not understand, she said softly. Connor was sitting at the dining table pretending to read news on his tablet, but his eyes were fixed on Leo. You said he had a fever of 102 last night. You said he was burning up. Connor did not look up immediately. He needed a moment to calibrate his next lie. The truth was that Leo never had a virus. He was teething, his molars were coming in, and any parent knows that causes a low-grade fever and irritability. But Connor had twisted that mundane biological fact into a weapon of mass destruction. Now that weapon was disarming itself right in front of them. It comes in waves, Connor said, finally lowering the tablet. That is how this virus works, babe. It gives you a false sense of security. The doctors say the crash comes after the rally. He is not better, Kendra. He is in the eye of the storm. Kendra walked over to Leo. She placed her hand on his forehead. The boy giggled and pushed her hand away. He feels cool, Connor, she said, turning to look at her husband. He feels completely normal. Maybe the thermometer was broken. Maybe Dad was telling the truth. Maybe he did not bring anything in here. The mention of my name made Connor stiffen. He stood up and walked over to them. He loomed over Kendra, casting a shadow that swallowed her hope. Do not do that, he said, his voice sharp. Do not rewrite history just because you feel guilty. Your father went to a gambling den. We have the photos. We have the receipt. Just because Leo is having a good hour does not mean we were wrong. We protected him. That is what good parents do. But as Leo jumped off the couch and ran a lap around the kitchen island, screaming with joy, the cracks in Connor Represent's story became impossible to ignore. Kendra watched her son run. She was doing the math in her head. If Leo was fine, then I was innocent. And if I was innocent, then she had sent her father to die for nothing. Connor saw the doubt blooming in her eyes. He saw the way she looked at the front door, wondering if she should unlock it and go look for me. He knew that if she opened that door, his entire plan would collapse. He needed to sell the house before she realized the truth. And to keep her distracted, he needed Leo to be sick. He needed the crisis to continue. I'm going to make him some lunch, Connor said abruptly. You look exhausted, babe. Go take a shower. I will handle Leo. Kendra hesitated, but the emotional toll of the last 24 hours had drained her. She nodded gratefully and went upstairs. Connor watched her go. When he heard the shower turn on, he turned his attention to the kitchen. He was not going to make a sandwich. He was going to make a tragedy. He opened the high cabinet above the refrigerator where we kept the medicine. He pushed aside the vitamins and the Band-Aids until he found what he was looking for. It was a bottle of strong allergy medication, the kind that causes severe drowsiness. It was meant for adults. The label clearly stated that it should not be given to children under 12 without a doctor represent supervision. Connor did not care about the label. He cared about the narrative. He took 2 of the small pink pills out of the bottle. He placed them on the granite countertop, the same countertop where I used to roll out cookie dough with Leo on Sundays. Connor took the back of a heavy metal spoon and pressed down. There was a sickening crunch as the medicine turned into a fine pink powder. He was muttering to himself as he worked. It was a low, frantic whisper, the sound of a man trying to convince himself that he was not a monster. It is just for a few hours, he said to the empty kitchen. Just until the papers are signed. He needs to sleep anyway. Rest is good for growing boys. I am doing this for us, Leo. I am doing this so we can be rich. He scooped the pink dust into a bowl of warm apple cinnamon oatmeal. He stirred it vigorously, watching the color disappear into the brown sugar and spices. He added a splash of milk just the way I used to do it. Leo ran into the kitchen, attracted by the smell of the cinnamon. Hungry, buddy? Connor asked, putting on his best fatherly smile. Leo nodded, climbing onto his high chair. Is Grandpa coming back for lunch? He asked, swinging his legs. Connor Represent's smile did not waver, but his eyes went cold. Grandpa is on a long vacation, Leo. Eat your oatmeal. It will make you big and strong. He placed the poisoned bowl in front of the innocent child. Leo picked up his spoon. He took a big bite. Yum, Leo said. Connor watched him swallow. He did not look away. He stood there leaning against the counter, counting the spoonfuls. 1, 2, 3. With every bite, the drugs entered the boy Represent's system. Connor stroked Leo, Represent's hair gently. You are going to feel a little tired soon, buddy, Connor whispered. And when Mommy comes down, she is going to see that you are sick again, and then she will stop asking questions about Grandpa. See? Daddy is fixing everything. It was an act of betrayal so profound that it stained the very air in the room. A father poisoning his son to cover up the attempted murder of his father-in-law. Connor believed he was a mastermind. He believed no one was watching. He was wrong. 5 miles away in a sterile hospital room, the scene was playing out in high definition on a laptop screen. Sergeant Miller had connected the feed from my kitchen security camera to his computer. The camera was hidden inside the smoke detector, a precaution I had taken years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. I was sitting up in my hospital bed. My body was still weak, recovering from the hypothermia, but my mind was razor sharp. I watched the screen with an intensity that burned. I saw Connor crush the pills. I saw him stir the powder into the food. I saw him feed it to my grandson. I had faced fires that melted steel. I had seen car accidents that tore bodies apart. But I had never felt a pain like this. It was a cold, white-hot fury that started in my gut and spread to my fingertips. My hand was holding a plastic cup of water. As I watched Leo swallow the last spoonful, my grip tightened. The plastic buckled. Water exploded out over my hand and onto the sheets, but I did not feel the wetness. I crushed the cup until it was nothing but a twisted piece of refuse in my fist. He drugged him. Miller whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. He just drugged the kid. Grady, we have to go. Now. Miller stood up, reaching for his radio. I am calling it in. I am sending a squad car. That is child endangerment. That is assault. We can arrest him right now. No, I said. The word came out like a gunshot. Miller stopped. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. Grady, look at the screen, Miller pleaded. He is poisoning your grandson. We cannot wait. Sit down, Miller, I commanded. I looked at the screen. Leo was already rubbing his eyes. His head was drooping. The drugs were hitting his small body hard. Connor was picking him up, carrying him to the sofa, ready to present the sleeping child to Kendra as proof of the virus represents return. The boy will sleep, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. It is an antihistamine, Miller. I saw the bottle. It will not kill him. It will just knock him out for 6 hours. But Grady, why let him get away with it? Miller asked. Because if you arrest him now, I said, turning my gaze from the screen to the police officer, what happens? He gets charged with misdemeanor child abuse. He claims it was an accident, that he mixed up the bottles. He gets a good lawyer. He gets out on bail. And he still has my house. He still has my daughter represents ear. He will spin this. He will say he was stressed, he made a mistake. I took a deep breath. My heart monitor was beeping faster, reflecting the rage boiling inside me. I do not want him to have a bad day, Miller. I want him to have no future. I want him to sell the house. I want him to sign that fraudulent deed. I want him to commit grand larceny and wire fraud. I want the federal government involved. But Leo Miller protested. Leo is the soldier on the front line right now, I said, and it breaks my heart. But if I save him today, I lose him tomorrow. Connor will take him away. He will move them to another state. I will never see my family again. I looked back at the screen. Connor was laying Leo down, covering him with a blanket. He looked like a caring father. It made me sick. Let him think he is safe, I whispered. Let him think his plan is working. Let him sell the house. Let him take the money. And the moment he touches that cash, I want the handcuffs on him so tight they cut to the bone. Miller slowly sat back down. He understood. This was not just about safety anymore. It was about total annihilation. I want him to lose it all, I said, squeezing the crushed cup in my hand. His freedom, his reputation, his wife, his son, and the money he loves so much. He wants to play games with my family. Fine. I am going to show him how the game ends. I lay back against the pillows, my eyes never leaving the screen. Sleep well, Leo, I thought. When you wake up, Grandpa is going to bring the thunder. The arrival of Judgment Day did not come with thunder or lightning. It arrived in a sleek, black town car that pulled into my driveway at exactly noon. I was watching from my hospital bed, my eyes glued to the screen of Sergeant Miller represents laptop. The man who stepped out of the car was Alistair. To the world, he was a high-powered investment banker representing a shadow consortium of buyers. To me, he was the man who had stood beside me in the trenches 40 years ago. He was the godfather of my daughter. He was the only man I trusted to execute a play this dangerous. Alistair was dressed in a suit that cost more than Connor made in 3 months. It was a charcoal gray three-piece custom tailored to fit his broad shoulders. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had traveled to every financial capital in the world. He adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of the car window and walked up the path to the front door. He did not look like a friend. He looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. Connor opened the door before Alistair could even knock. My son-in-law was wearing his best shirt, but I could see the sweat stains spreading under his arms. He was trying to project confidence, but next to Alistair, he looked like a nervous schoolboy who had forgotten his homework. "Mr. Vance," Alistair said. His voice was deep and smooth, commanding instant respect. "I am Alistair." We spoke on the phone. Connor extended his hand. His palm was likely clammy. Alistair looked at the hand for a fraction of a second too long before shaking it briefly. It was a power move. It told Connor exactly who was in charge. "Please come in," Connor said, stepping aside. "Welcome to your potential new investment." Alistair walked into the foyer. He did not smile. He looked around the house with a critical, almost bored expression. He tapped the wall with a manicured finger. "Structural integrity seems adequate," Alistair noted, his tone implying that it was barely acceptable. "But the interior is dated. We will have to gut the entire ground floor. The wood paneling is atrocious." I smiled in my hospital bed. That wood paneling was hand-selected oak I had installed myself. Alistair knew that. He was insulting my work on purpose to rattle Connor to make him feel like the house was worth less than he thought. Connor swallowed hard. "Well, it has great bones, and the location is unbeatable." Alistair walked into the kitchen. He placed his briefcase on the table right next to the spot where Connor had poisoned my grandson just hours before. The juxtaposition made my blood boil, but I forced myself to focus on the sting. "Let us skip the tour," Mr. Vance, Alistair said, checking a gold watch on his wrist. "I have a flight to Zurich in 3 hours. My clients are interested in the land, not the sentimental value of the structure. We are prepared to make an all-cash offer today, but the price we discussed on the phone is too high for a property that requires this much work." Connor Represent's eyes widened. "But we agreed on 600,000. Alistair laughed softly. "That was before I saw the condition of the roof and the plumbing. 450,000. Take it or leave it." Connor looked like he had been punched in the gut. He opened his mouth to argue, but Alistair held up a hand. "Cash, Mr. Vance. Today. No banks. No waiting for mortgage approvals. You walk away with nearly $500,000 in liquid assets by this afternoon. Or you can list it on the open market and wait 6 months for a buyer who might back out." I watched Connor do the mental gymnastics. He was greedy, but he was also desperate. He needed to pay off the gambling debts before the loan sharks came for his knees. He needed to disappear before Kendra started asking too many questions. 450,000 was still a fortune to a man with nothing. "Fine," Connor said, his voice cracking slightly. 450. "But we close now." Alistair nodded. He sat down at the table and opened his briefcase. He did not reveal the money yet. He pulled out a crisp, legal document. "Standard purchase agreement," Alistair said, "and the affidavit regarding the life estate. My researchers found a clause attached to the deed involving a Mr. Grady Wilson." Connor froze. This was the moment. The trap was set. "Oh, that," Connor said, waving his hand dismissively. "That is just a formality. Mr. Wilson is my father-in-law. He moved to Florida last year. He loves the heat. He has no interest in this place anymore." Alistair looked at him over the rim of his reading glasses. "And you have the signed release form. We cannot transfer title without it." Connor reached into his own jacket pocket. He pulled out the document he had paid the forger Silas to create just hours ago. It was a masterpiece of fraud. It had my signature at the bottom, looking exactly like the one in my ledger. It even had a notary seal that looked legitimate to the untrained eye. "Right here," Connor said, sliding the paper across the table. "Signed, sealed, and delivered. He waives all rights to the property." Alistair picked up the paper. He scrutinized it. I held my breath. Alistair knew my signature better than anyone. He knew this was a fake, but he had to sell the performance. He nodded slowly. "Seems to be in order." Alistair pulled a fountain pen from his pocket. He uncapped it and placed it on the purchase agreement. "Sign here, Mr. Vance. And here. By signing this, you are certifying under penalty of perjury that you are the sole authorized seller and that all liens and encumbrances have been cleared." Connor did not hesitate. He did not think about his wife upstairs. He did not think about his son sleeping off the drugs on the couch. He thought only of the money. He grabbed the pen. I watched the tip of the pen touch the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. He signed his name with a flourish. Connor Vance. Then he signed the affidavit swearing that I had voluntarily given up my home. With those signatures, he had sealed his fate. He had committed felony forgery, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The camera in the smoke detector recorded every stroke of the pen. "Excellent," Alistair said, pulling the papers back. He closed the folder and placed it in the side pocket of his briefcase. Then he turned the briefcase around so it faced Connor. He clicked the latches. The sound was loud in the silent kitchen. Snap, snap. Alistair lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of $100 bills. $200,000 in cash as the initial deposit, with the rest to be wired upon recording of the deed. The money smelled of ink and power. It was the smell Connor had been chasing his entire life. Connor stared at the money. His mouth hung open slightly. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the top stack. It was real. $200,000 now, Alistair said. The wire transfer for the remaining balance will be initiated within the hour. Do we have a deal? We have a deal, Connor whispered. He looked like he wanted to cry. He thought he had pulled off the perfect crime. He thought he had outsmarted everyone. Alistair stood up and buttoned his jacket. He did not offer his hand this time. He looked at Connor with a hidden disgust that only I could recognize. Enjoy the money, Mr. Vance, Alistair said. You have earned it. Alistair turned and walked out of the house. He did not look back. He got into his car and drove away carrying the evidence that would put Connor in prison for 20 years. Connor was alone in the kitchen. He did not go check on Leo. He did not call Kendra. He grabbed the briefcase and hugged it to his chest. He did a little dance, a pathetic jig of victory. He laughed a high-pitched, manic sound that echoed off the cabinets. I won, he said to the empty room. I finally won. I watched him from my hospital bed. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. He had the money, yes, but the money was marked. The serial numbers had been recorded by the FBI unit that Alistair had contacted on my behalf. Every bill in that briefcase was a tracking device. Connor poured himself another drink. He toasted the air. He thought he was the king of the world. He had no idea that the crown he was wearing was made of lead, and he was standing in the middle of a sinking ship. I reached for the phone to call Miller. He took the bait I said. I know, Miller replied. I have the team on standby. When do we move? Not yet, I said, watching Connor stack the cash on the table. Let him feel rich for an hour. Let him pack his bags. Let him think he is getting away. I want to catch him when he is walking out the door. I hung up. The hardest part was over. Now came the part I was dreading, the part where my daughter had to find out that her husband was a monster and that her father was dead. It was a cruel lesson, but it was the only way to save her. I lay back and closed my eyes. The image of Connor laughing with the money burned in my mind. Laugh while you can, son, I thought, because winter is coming for you, and this time there will be no shelter. The knock on the door came at 2 p.m. It was not the confident rap of a businessman like Alistair or the impatient pounding of a creditor. It was the heavy, solemn knock of law enforcement. I was watching from my safe house at the lake where Sergeant Miller had set me up. I sat in a wooden chair, my eyes fixed on the laptop screen, witnessing the moment my daughter's heart would break. Connor opened the door. He was still high on the adrenaline of the sale. He probably thought it was the courier with the wire transfer confirmation. Instead, he found a uniformed officer standing on the porch. It was Officer Daniels, one of Miller's most trusted men. He held a manila envelope in his gloved hands. Mrs. Kendra Vance, Daniels asked, looking past Connor. Kendra walked into the hallway. She looked fragile. Her eyes were still red from crying over the confusing situation with Leo. When she saw the officer, her hand flew to her throat. I am Kendra, she whispered. Daniels removed his hat. He played his part perfectly. I am afraid I have some bad news. We found a body this morning near the abandoned precinct on 4th Street. No identification was found on the person, but based on the physical description and the missing persons report filed earlier, we believe it to be your father, Mr. Grady Wilson. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when the world stops spinning. Kendra did not scream. She did not faint. She just stared at the officer as if he were speaking a foreign language. Her brain was trying to reject the information. "Dead?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Exposure," Daniels said softly. "The medical examiner estimates he passed away sometime during the storm last night. It appears he was trying to reach the station for shelter but succumbed to the cold before he could get inside." Succumbed. It was a sterile word for a horrific death. It was a word that hid the reality of freezing alone in the dark. But it was the word that broke my daughter. Kendra's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the hardwood floor, not gracefully but heavily like a puppet whose strings had been cut. She let out a wail that tore through the speakers of my laptop. It was a primal sound of pure agony. "Daddy!" she screamed, curling into a ball. "Oh God, Daddy, I am sorry." Connor stood over her. For a split second, I saw the relief wash over his face. The problem was solved. The obstacle was removed. The life estate was no longer an issue because the life in question was over. He had won. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around her. To an outsider, it looked like a loving husband comforting his grieving wife. But I knew better. I saw the way he looked over her shoulder at the officer. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a nod of acknowledgement. A nod that said, "Thank you for bringing me the good news." "I am so sorry, baby," Connor said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I know how much you loved him." He was lying to her while she lay on the floor, shattered by the guilt he had manufactured. I watched my little girl fall apart, and I could not do a thing to stop it. I had to let the pain happen. I had to let her feel the weight of her actions, because it was the only way she would ever see the truth about the man holding her. An hour later, they arrived at the county morgue. I could not see this part on camera, but Miller recounted every detail to me later with a grim satisfaction. The morgue was located in the basement of the hospital, a place of stainless steel and fluorescent lights that buzzed with a low, annoying hum. The air was kept at a constant frigid temperature to preserve the dead. Kendra walked in holding Connor's arm for support. She was trembling so violently that her teeth chattered. Officer Daniels led them to a gurney in the center of the room. A body lay there covered by a white sheet. It was a John Doe, a homeless man who had passed away from natural causes the day before. Miller had arranged for the identification to be done in a way that protected my secret. "We just need you to confirm the personal effects," Daniels said gently. He placed a plastic bag on a metal tray. Inside were my wallet, my watch, and the wedding ring I had worn for 40 years. Kendra gasped when she saw the ring. It was a simple gold band, scratched and worn from decades of work. She reached out and touched the plastic bag as if it were a holy relic. "That is his," she sobbed. "That is my father's ring." She turned toward the body. She wanted to pull back the sheet. She wanted to see my face one last time. "I would not recommend that, ma'am," Daniel said, stepping in front of her. "The elements were not kind. It is better to remember him as he was." Kendra nodded, tears streaming down her face. She fell to her knees on the cold tile floor right beside the metal table. She pressed her forehead against the cold steel rail. "I am sorry, Daddy," she wept. Her voice echoed off the tile walls, a lonely sound of regret. "I should have opened the door. I should have come looking for you. I was so scared. I let him scare me. Please forgive me. Please do not leave me alone with this." Her confession was raw and honest. She was taking responsibility. She was begging for forgiveness from a father she thought could no longer hear her. Connor stood a few feet behind her. He did not kneel. He did not cry. He stood with his hands in the pockets of his expensive coat. He looked at the sheet-covered body with a look of mild distaste, as if he were looking at a bag of trash that had been left out too long. While Kendra poured her heart out to the dead, Connor pulled his phone from his pocket. He angled it so that neither Kendra nor the officer could see the screen. His thumbs moved quickly over the glass. He was texting his mistress, a woman named Vanessa, who worked as his former secretary. "The old man is gone," he typed. "Free at last. The money is in the bag and the house is sold. Pack your things. We are going to Cabo as soon as the funeral is over." He hit send. A small smile played on his lips. He looked at the back of his wife's head, shaking with grief, and he felt nothing but impatience. He checked his watch. He wanted to get out of there. The smell of formaldehyde was ruining his appetite for the celebratory dinner he was planning in his head. "Come on, babe," Connor said, putting a hand on Kendra's shoulder. "We should go. There is nothing more we can do here. You need to rest." Kendra looked up at him. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. She looked at him for comfort, but for the first time she saw something else. She saw the dryness of his eyes. She saw the lack of redness. She saw a man who was ready to leave before the body was even cold. "Just a minute, Connor," she whispered, pulling away from his touch. "Just give me 1 minute." Connor sighed loudly. It was a short, sharp sound of annoyance that he could not suppress. "Fine, but hurry up, this place gives me the creeps." He walked to the door and stood there tapping his foot. He did not look at the body again. He looked at his phone, waiting for a reply from Vanessa. Kendra stayed on her knees. She placed her hand on the sheet over the chest of the stranger she thought was her father. "I promise you, Dad," she whispered so low Connor could not hear. "I will take care of Leo. I will not let him become like us." She stood up slowly. She wiped her face. She walked past Connor without taking his hand. The chill of the morgue had seeped into her bones, but it had also woken her up. She was beginning to see the man she married not as a partner, but as a stranger standing in the shadows. The drive home was silent. The city was waking up from the blizzard. Snowplows were clearing the streets, pushing the dirty gray slush to the side. Life was returning to normal for everyone except my daughter. Kendra sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of my ring in that plastic bag. She saw the closed door of her house. She heard my voice begging her not to make a mistake. Connor drove with one hand on the wheel. He turned on the radio. Soft jazz filled the car. He hummed along, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He was happy. The realization hit Kendra like a physical blow. Her father was dead. He had died a horrible frozen death because they had kicked him out, and her husband was humming. She turned her head slowly to look at him. The streetlights flickered over his face, illuminating a relaxed expression. He looked like a man who had just finished a difficult project and was looking forward to the weekend. "How can you listen to music?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Connor turned down the volume slightly but did not turn it off. "What do you mean, babe? We have to keep moving forward. Dwelling on it will not bring him back. Besides, it is better this way." "Better?" Kendra repeated the word, tasting like bile in her mouth. "I mean, he was suffering," Connor said, shrugging. "His heart condition. The confusion. And now the risk to Leo is gone. We can focus on us. We can focus on the new house. With the money from the sale, we can buy that place in Florida you always wanted." "We haven't not even buried him yet," Kendra said, her voice rising. "And you are talking about spending the money." Connor glanced at her, his eyes narrowing. "It is what he would have wanted, Kendra. He signed the papers. He wanted us to be happy. Do not be dramatic." Kendra looked back out the window. She felt a cold knot form in her stomach. It was not grief anymore. It was suspicion. She remembered the speed with which Connor had packed my bags. She remembered the way he had blocked the door. She remembered the allergy medicine on the counter, and now his indifference. He did not care. He never cared. Kendra wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the heated car. She was beginning to realize that the cold she felt outside the house that night was nothing compared to the cold sitting right next to her. She closed her eyes and saw my face again. But this time, she did not just feel guilt. She felt a question burning in her mind. Why was he so happy? And for the first time in her life, Kendra Vance began to fear her husband more than she feared the virus. 3 days after my funeral, that was not really a funeral, my daughter Kendra went to the grocery store. It was a mundane act in the middle of a tragedy, but life demands maintenance even when your world has ended. She was buying napkins for a reception that would never happen, and milk for a son whose grandfather would never pour it again. I watched her from the safety of the feed Sergeant Miller had tapped into. She looked like a ghost walking through the aisles. She moved without purpose, staring at labels she did not read and placing items in her cart that she did not need. Her eyes were swollen almost shut, and she wore a black coat that was too big for her, as if she were trying to hide inside the fabric. She walked out into the parking lot. The sun was shining, which felt like an insult to her grief. She pushed her cart toward her minivan, the wheels rattling over the asphalt. She opened the trunk and began to load the bags. A carton of eggs, a jug of juice, a box of cereal. Every item was a reminder of the domestic life she was trying to hold together while it crumbled around her. A dark sedan pulled up behind her, blocking her path. It was not a police cruiser, but she recognized the man behind the wheel immediately. Sergeant Miller stepped out. He was not wearing his uniform today. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, looking like a man who had just come from a fishing trip. But his face was hard. He did not look like a man on vacation. Kendra froze, holding a bag of apples. She looked at him with fear. She thought he was there to bring more bad news. She thought maybe they had found something else on my body, or that there was an issue with the coroner report. "Sergeant Miller," she said, her voice trembling. "Is something wrong?" Miller walked up to her. He did not offer condolences. He did not ask how she was holding up. He looked at her with the intense focus of a surgeon about to make a necessary incision. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "I need you to stop what you are doing and listen to me." Kendra dropped the bag of apples. They rolled across the asphalt, bruising on the hard ground. She did not chase them. "What is it?" she asked. "Did you find something?" Miller reached into his truck and pulled out a tablet. The screen was black. He held it like a shield. "Your father left you something," Miller said, "but it is not a will and it is not a letter. It is the truth." Kendra shook her head, confused. "The truth? What do you mean?" Connor said Dad was confused. He said he wandered off. Miller stepped closer, invading her personal space just enough to force her to pay attention. "Connor lied," Miller said. "He lied about everything. He lied about the gambling. He lied about the virus. And he lied about who your father really was." Kendra took a step back. She wanted to run. She wanted to get in her car and drive away from this man who was tearing at the scab of her grief. But she could not move. The conviction in Miller's voice held her in place. "I do not want to hear this," she whispered. "Please just let me bury him in peace." "You cannot bury a lie," Mrs. Vance, Miller said. "You have to look at it." He unlocked the tablet. He did not ask for permission. He pressed play and shoved the screen into her hands. Kendra looked down. The glare of the sun made it hard to see at first, but then her eyes adjusted. She saw her own kitchen. She saw the timestamp in the corner. It was the morning of the blizzard, the morning she had sent me away. The video on the screen was high definition, and the audio was crystal clear. Kendra saw her husband standing at the counter. She saw the bottle of allergy medication. She saw him crush the pink pills with the back of a spoon. "What is this?" she whispered, her hands starting to shake. "Watch," Miller commanded. On the screen, Connor swept the pink powder into a bowl of oatmeal. He stirred it. He added milk. And then he spoke to the empty room. "Just a little nap," Leo Connor said on the video, his voice casual and chilling. "Mommy needs to think you are sick so we can get rich." Kendra gasped. The sound was like the air leaving a tire. She watched as her son ran into the frame. She watched Connor feed him the poisoned spoon. She watched the man she shared a bed with poison their only child just to maintain a narrative of fear. "Oh my God," Kendra choked out. "He drugged him. He made him sick." "Keep watching," Miller said. He did not let her look away. He swiped to the next video. The scene changed. It was my bedroom. The room was tossed. Connor was ripping drawers out of the desk. He found the red ledger. Kendra recognized it immediately. It was the book I used to teach her math when she was a little girl. On the screen, Connor opened the book. He read the entry. And then he spoke the words that would rewrite Kendra's entire understanding of her marriage. $50,000. Connor sneered on the video. "Paid to Sal the butcher. Saved my life, did you, old man? Well, nobody asked you to." Kendra stared at the screen. She saw Connor rip the pages out. She saw him spit on the remnants of the book. She saw the pure, unadulterated hatred on his face. "The $50,000 we were saving for a down payment," Kendra whispered. "He told me he lost it in the stock market crash. He told me it was bad luck. He gambled it away," Miller said, his voice cutting through her shock. "And your father paid the debt to keep him from being killed. Your father saved his life, Kendra, and in return Connor threw him out into a blizzard to die." The tablet slipped from Kendra's numb fingers. Miller caught it before it hit the ground. He had delivered the payload. The bomb had detonated. Kendra stood in the middle of the parking lot surrounded by scattered apples. Her world was spinning. The grief she had felt for me was suddenly replaced by a nausea so violent she had to grab the side of her car to keep from vomiting. She had married a monster. She had brought a wolf into the sheepfold, and when the wolf bared its teeth, she had helped him slaughter the shepherd. The realization was a physical pain. It started in her chest and spread to her limbs. She felt dirty. She felt complicit. Every time Connor had touched her in the last 3 days, Every time he had whispered that they were doing the right thing, she had been sleeping with the enemy. She looked at Miller. Her eyes were wide and wild. There were no tears left, only fire. "Where is he?" she asked. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was low and guttural. Miller checked his watch. "He is at the house. He is packing. He thinks you are buying snacks for the road trip." Kendra turned around. She did not pick up the groceries. She did not close the trunk properly. She got into the driver's seat of her minivan. Miller put a hand on her door. "Mrs. Vance, do not do anything stupid. We have a plan." "I have a plan too," Kendra said. She slammed the door. She started the engine. The engine roared to life, echoing the scream building inside her throat. She threw the car into reverse tires, screeching against the pavement. She backed out without looking. She was not driving a minivan anymore. She was driving a weapon. She merged onto the main road. The speed limit was 35, but Kendra was doing 60. She gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. She did not see the other cars. She did not see the red lights. All she saw was Connor's face. She saw him smiling at the morgue. She saw him humming in the car. She saw him feeding poison to her son. "He is going to pay," she screamed to the empty car. "He is going to pay for every single second." She drove past the park where I used to take Leo. She drove past the fire station where I used to work. She drove past the life I had built for her. And with every mile, the daughter who had been too afraid to stand up for her father died a little more. In her place, a woman of rage was born, a woman who finally understood that silence is not peace, it is surrender. And Kendra Vance was done surrendering. She turned onto Oak Street, the tires squealing around the corner. She saw the house, my house, the house Connor had sold. She pressed the accelerator to the floor. She was coming home, and she was bringing the storm with her. Kendra did not park the car in the driveway. She abandoned it. She left the driver's side door wide open and the engine running. The minivan sat askew on the lawn, tearing up the grass I had manicured for 30 years, but she did not care. She ran up the front steps, taking them two at a time. Her breath came in sharp, ragged gasps that hurt her chest. She did not use her key. She did not knock. She threw her shoulder against the heavy oak door, bursting into the foyer like a SWAT team of one. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It was the silence of a place that had been stripped of its soul. Kendra stood in the hallway listening. She heard a sound coming from the master bedroom upstairs. It was the sound of a zipper. Zip, click, then the rustle of fabric, then whistling. Her husband was whistling. Kendra walked up the stairs. Her legs felt heavy as lead, but her rage propelled her forward. She reached the landing and looked into the bedroom. The room was in chaos. Clothes were thrown everywhere, but they were not black morning clothes. They were bright colors, linen shirts, swim trunks, silk ties. Connor stood by the bed. He was folding a floral shirt with meticulous care. A large leather suitcase lay open on the duvet. Next to it was the briefcase Alistair had left. It was closed, but it radiated a presence of its own. Connor looked up when he saw her. He did not look guilty. He looked annoyed, like a parent whose child had interrupted an important phone call. "You are back early," he said, smoothing the collar of the shirt. "Did you get the snacks?" "I was thinking we should hit the road before rush hour. I booked a flight out of JFK for tonight. First class, baby. We are going to Cabo." Kendra stepped into the room. She looked at the suitcase. She looked at the briefcase. She looked at the man she had promised to love and cherish until death did them part. "We are not going anywhere," she said. Her voice was low and dangerous. It was a tone Connor had never heard before. It was my tone. Connor chuckled. He threw a pair of sunglasses into the bag. "Don't be silly, Kendra. You need a break. All this crying over your dad has stressed you out. The ocean will make you feel better." "You poisoned him," Kendra said. She did not scream it. She stated it as a fact. Connor stopped packing. He stood very still. His back was to her. "Excuse me," he asked. "I saw the video, Connor." Kendra walked closer, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I saw you crush the pills. I saw you put them in Leo represents oatmeal. I saw you laugh about it. Connor turned around slowly. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes were calculating. He was assessing the threat. He was wondering how she knew. "You are hysterical," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "You are hallucinating, Kendra. Grief does strange things to the mind. Do not lie to me," Kendra screamed. The sound tore through her throat, painful and raw. "I saw you. Miller showed me. You drugged our son so you could pretend he was sick. You threw my father out into a blizzard to die because you wanted this house." She pointed a trembling finger at the briefcase. "You killed him for money, Connor. You murdered my father for paper." Connor looked at her. He saw the conviction in her eyes. He knew the game was up. There was no point in denying it anymore. The mask of the loving husband slipped off and fell to the floor, shattering into a million pieces. In its place was the face of a sociopath. He did not apologize. He did not beg. He shrugged. "He was old," Kendra Connor said, his voice cold and devoid of empathy. "He was dead weight, and frankly so are you." The words hung in the air. Kendra stared at him, unable to comprehend the level of his depravity. "What did you say?" she whispered. "I said you are dead weight," Connor repeated, stepping closer to her. "You and that brat of yours. Do you think I wanted to play house with a washed-up secretary and her noisy kid? I wanted the lifestyle, Kendra. I deserved the lifestyle. Your father was sitting on a gold mine and he was too selfish to share it. I just accelerated the inheritance." "You are a monster," Kendra cried. She lunged at him. It was not a calculated attack. It was an explosion of pain. She swung her hand and connected with his face. The sound of the slap was loud and satisfying. It left a bright red mark on his cheek. Connor stumbled back. He touched his face. He looked at his hand as if checking for blood. Then he looked at Kendra. His eyes went black. "You stupid cow!" he growled. He backhanded her. It was a violent, vicious blow. He hit her with a closed fist. Kendra flew backward. She hit the wall and slid down to the floor. Her lips split open. Blood tasted metallic in her mouth. She looked up at him stunned. He had never hit her before, but then she realized he had always been hitting her. With his words, with his lies, with his manipulation. This was just the first time he had used his hands. Connor stood over her, adjusting his cuffs. He looked down at her with pure disgust. "You really thought I loved you, didn't you?" he sneered. "You thought I was the perfect husband. God, you are pathetic. You were just the key to the lock, Kendra. And now that the lock is broken, I do not need the key anymore." He walked over to the bed and snapped the suitcase shut. He grabbed the handle of the briefcase containing the cash. "I sold the house," he said casually, as if commenting on the weather. "I signed the papers an hour ago. The money is in this bag. The new owners will be here tomorrow to kick you out. So I suggest you start packing. Or don't. I really do not care." He checked his watch. "I am leaving," he announced. "Do not try to follow me. Do not try to call the police. If you do, I will tell them you were in on it. I will tell them it was your idea to kill the old man. Who do you think they will believe? The grieving widow or the dutiful son-in-law?" He laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Goodbye, Kendra. Give Leo a kiss for me, or give him a pill, whatever keeps him quiet." He turned toward the door. He had the money. He had his freedom. He walked out of the bedroom feeling invincible. He walked down the hallway whistling that same jazz tune. He reached the top of the stairs. Then the world turned blue. It started as a flicker against the hallway window. A pulse of light. Blue, red, blue, red. It swept across the walls, illuminating the family photos I had hung there years ago. It illuminated Connor Represent's face, freezing him in mid-step. He stopped whistling. He walked to the window at the end of the hall. He looked out. Below on the street, it looked like the 4th of July. Every police car in the county was parked on the lawn. There were unmarked sedans. There were SWAT vans. There were officers in tactical gear crouching behind car doors, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at the front door. The lights reflected in Connor Represent's eyes. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear. Real fear. Not the fake panic he used to manipulate Kendra, but the primal terror of a trapped animal. A voice boomed from a megaphone, amplified and distorted, but loud enough to shake the foundations of the house. "Connor Vance, this is the police. We have the house surrounded. Come out with your hands above your head." Connor stumbled back from the window. He looked at the briefcase in his hand. The money. The $200,000. It was supposed to be his ticket to paradise. Now it was just evidence. He looked back at the bedroom door. Kendra was standing there. She was leaning against the doorframe, wiping blood from her lip. She was not crying anymore. She was smiling. It was a cold, broken smile, but it was a smile of victory. She had heard the megaphone. She saw the lights. "You said you were leaving." Kendra whispered, her voice raspy but clear. "So go. They are waiting for you." Connor looked at her. He looked at the window. He looked at the stairs. He was running the calculations in his head, trying to find a lie that would get him out of this. But there were no lies left. The math did not work. He dropped the suitcase. It fell down the stairs, tumbling end over end until it hit the bottom with a crash. But he did not drop the briefcase. He clutched it to his chest like a lifeline. He ran. He did not run down the stairs to surrender. He ran toward the back of the house. He ran toward the guest room window that overlooked the garage roof. He thought he could climb out. He thought he could jump the fence. He thought he could outrun the consequences of his actions. I watched him run on the monitor. I sat in my chair at the lake house and took a sip of lukewarm coffee. "Run, rabbit, run," I whispered to the screen, because I knew something Connor did not. I knew that Officer Daniels was waiting in the backyard, and I knew that Daniels used to be a linebacker in college. Connor Vance was about to have a very bad collision with reality. The front door did not open. It disintegrated. The sound was like a thunderclap inside a canyon. Wood splinters flew through the air like shrapnel. I watched the breach on my monitor, and for the first time in 3 days, I smiled. The tactical team moved with a fluidity that was beautiful to watch. They flowed into the foyer like a river of black armor and kinetic energy. "Police, get down. Get down now." The command was a wall of sound. Connor was trapped in the hallway. He had nowhere to run. The window behind him was blocked by a sniper. The stairs in front of him were filled with SWAT officers. He stood there frozen. He looked like a deer in headlights, but a deer does not hold a briefcase full of marked bills. He raised his hand slowly, but he did not drop the briefcase. He held onto it with a death grip. His knuckles were white. That money was his only reality. He believed that if he held onto the cash, he could still buy his way out of this. "Do not shoot," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I am the homeowner. This is my property. I have rights." He was shouting about rights while standing in the house he had stolen. He was shouting about property laws while holding the proceeds of a felony. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. "Drop the bag," a SWAT officer commanded, pointing a rifle at Connor Represent's chest. Connor shook his head. "Number. This is mine. I just sold the house. This is a legal transaction. You cannot take this. My lawyer will sue the department. I know my rights." He was delirious. The stress had snapped something in his brain. He truly believed that the piece of paper he had signed with a forged signature gave him moral high ground. He waved the briefcase at the officers as if it were a shield. "Ask my wife," he yelled, gesturing toward the bedroom where Kendra was standing. "She will tell you. We sold the house. We are moving. This is harassment." The officers did not care about his explanations. 2 of them moved forward. One kicked the back of Connor Represent's knee. Connor buckled. He hit the floor hard, but he still did not let go of the handle. He curled around the briefcase, protecting it with his body. "It is mine," he sobbed into the carpet. "It is all mine." The officers grabbed his arms. They wrenched them behind his back. The briefcase slid across the floor, spinning until it hit the baseboard. Connor watched it go with a look of pure devastation. It was as if they had taken his child. The handcuffs clicked. The sound was sharp and final. "Clear the room," the lead officer shouted. "Secure the suspect." The house fell silent again. The shouting stopped. The only sound was Connor Represent's heavy breathing and the radio chatter from the officers. Kendra stepped out of the bedroom. She looked down at her husband. She did not look scared anymore. She looked empty. Then the formation changed. The officers in the hallway stepped aside. They pressed their backs against the walls, creating a wide path from the front door to the bottom of the stairs. It was a guard of honor. I wheeled myself in. I was not walking. The hypothermia had taken a toll on my legs, and the doctors said it would be weeks before I could stand without support. But I did not need to stand to be tall. I sat in a heavy-duty hospital wheelchair, my legs covered by a thick wool blanket. Sergeant Miller pushed me. I rolled over the threshold of the house I built. I rolled past the splintered wood of the doorframe. I rolled past the officers who nodded at me with respect. I looked at the walls. I looked at the photos. I breathed in the air of my home. It smelled of gunpowder and justice. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Connor was lying on his stomach, his face pressed against the floor. He twisted his neck to see who had entered. He expected a detective. He expected a judge. He saw a dead man. His eyes bulged. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like wet dough. He stopped breathing. He tried to scramble backward, but the officers held him down. "No," he whispered. "No, you are dead." I saw the body. I looked at him. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice. I looked at him with the cold indifference of a glacier. "Hello, son-in-law," I said. My voice was rough from the intubation tube, but it carried through the house. "Is the suitcase heavy?" I asked. Connor started to shake. It was a violent tremor that rattled his handcuffs. "You are a ghost," he stammered. "I saw the ring. I saw the wallet. You froze. You are dead." "I am hard to kill, Connor," I said. "Fire could not do it. Smoke could not do it. And a little snow certainly could not do it." I looked up at the top of the stairs. Kendra was gripping the banister. She looked like she was about to faint. She looked from me to Connor and back again. The realization hit her like a physical wave. "Dad," she whispered. I did not look at her yet. I could not. If I looked at her, I would break, and I needed to be steel. I kept my eyes on the man on the floor. "You wanted me gone so badly," I continued. "You wanted my house, you wanted my money, you wanted my life. Well, here I am, Connor. I am back. And I brought some friends." Alistair walked in behind me. He was still wearing his expensive suit, but he had lost the bored expression of the investment banker. Now he looked like exactly what he was, a ruthless attorney who enjoyed hunting predators. He carried a tablet in his hand. He walked over to Connor and looked down at him with a sneer. "Mr. Vance," Alistair said, "it appears there has been a misunderstanding regarding the transaction we concluded earlier." Connor looked at Alistair. Confusion warred with terror in his eyes. "You bought the house," Connor rasped. "We signed the papers. You gave me the cash." Alistair laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I did not buy the house, Mr. Vance. A shell company called Phoenix Holdings bought the house." "And do you know who owns Phoenix Holdings?" Alistair turned the tablet around and showed Connor the screen. It displayed a corporate registration document. The name of the sole proprietor was highlighted in bold letters. Grady Wilson. Connor stared at the name. His brain tried to process the information, but it was too much. "I do not understand," Connor mumbled. "It is simple math, son," I said, leaning forward in my chair. "I use the payout from my life insurance policy, which I can access in the case of terminal illness or critical injury, combined with my savings to fund the company." "You sold my house to me, Connor," I said, letting the words sink in. "You forged a signature to sell my own property back to me using my own money." Alistair chimed in, twisting the knife. "And since you signed an affidavit swearing you were the legal owner and that Mr. Wilson had waived his rights, you have committed fraud against the buyer, who is also Mr. Wilson. You have also committed wire fraud because the electronic transfer was initiated across state lines. And finally, since the cash you are holding is technically the property of Mr. Wilson, you are currently in possession of stolen goods." Connor looked at the briefcase lying against the wall, the money he had worshipped, the money he had killed for. It was never his. It was a trap. A bait so sweet he had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. "You set me up!" Connor screamed. He tried to lunge at me, but the officer slammed him back down. "This is entrapment. You tricked me." "I did not trick you, Connor," I said. "I just gave you what you wanted. You wanted a quick sale. I gave it to you. You wanted cash. I gave it to you. You wanted me dead. I gave you that too." I wheeled myself closer until I was just inches from his face. "But you forgot one thing," I whispered. "You forgot that I read everything. I read the deed, I read the law, and I read people. I knew you were greedy, Connor. I knew you would not check the buyer. I knew you would not ask questions. I counted on your greed being stronger than your brain." I looked at the officer holding him. "Get him out of my house," I said. "He is dirtying the carpet." Connor began to wail as they hauled him up. He screamed at Kendra. He screamed at Alistair. He screamed at God. "Kendra, help me," he begged, looking up at his wife. Tell them we did it together. Do not let them take me alone." He was trying to drag her down with him. Even at the end, he was a coward. Kendra stood at the top of the stairs. She looked down at the man she had married. She saw the snot running down his nose. She saw the madness in his eyes. And she saw the truth. She turned her back on him. She walked into her son represents room and closed the door. The click of that door closing was the loudest sound in the world. Connor represents screams were cut off as the officers dragged him out the front door and into the back of a squad car. The house was quiet again. Miller put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Lieutenant?" I took a deep breath. My chest hurt, my legs hurt, but my soul felt clean. "I am home, Miller," I said. "I am finally home." The room was dim, but the beam of light in Sergeant Miller's hand was cutting through the shadows like a laser sword. He held a small ultraviolet flashlight, the kind forensic teams use to look for blood at crime scenes. But tonight he was not looking for blood, he was looking for ink. Miller stepped over to the open briefcase that lay against the baseboard. The stacks of $100 bills sat there looking innocent and crisp. To the naked eye, they were just currency. They were the symbol of everything Connor had ever wanted. But Miller clicked the switch on his flashlight and the world changed color. The blue light washed over the money. Instantly, the bills began to glow. Across the face of Benjamin Franklin, on every single top note, a word appeared in bright neon green. It was not a watermark. It was a stamp placed there by the federal authorities. Evidence. Connor stared at the word. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, but the word remained. It was branded onto his fortune. Miller picked up a bundle of cash. He fanned it out. The word appeared again and again. Evidence, evidence, evidence. This money is not from a bank vault, Connor Miller said, his voice calm and terrifying. This money came from the evidence locker at the precinct. It was seized in a drug raid 3 months ago. We checked it out this morning specifically for this operation. Connor looked up at Miller. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. You mean it is dirty money, he whispered. It is worse than dirty, Miller replied, tossing the bundle back into the case. It is radioactive. By accepting this cash and signing those papers, you just completed a federal sting operation. You are not a businessman, Connor. You are a target, and we hit the bullseye. Connor looked at his hands. He rubbed them against his pants as if the invisible ink had stained his skin. He realized that the $200,000 he had hugged to his chest was nothing more than a neon sign pointing directly to his guilt. But that is just money, Connor stammered, desperate to find a loophole. I can return it. I did not spend it. It is a mistake. We can undo the sale. Alistair stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at Connor with the pity one might show a rabid dog before putting it down. We are way past mistakes, Mr. Vance, Alistair said. The fraud is the least of your worries. The district attorney is not interested in the money. He is interested in the boy. Connor froze. The boy. Leo. Alistair tapped the tablet he was holding. We have the video, Connor. We have the footage of you in the kitchen this morning. We have the audio of you talking to yourself while you crushed those pills. Connor began to shake his head violently. No, that was just allergy medicine. He was sniffling. I was helping him. Miller cut him off. We recovered the bowl from the trash, Connor. The lab is testing the residue right now, but we do not need the lab results to prove intent. We heard you. You said you needed him to sleep so you could get rich. You used a chemical restraint on a 5-year-old child to facilitate a felony. Miller leaned in close, his face inches from Connor. That is a Class A felony, Connor. Intentional injury to a child, and since you did it to cover up a crime, it falls under aggravated circumstances. And then there is the matter of Mr. Wilson, Alistair added, pointing at me. You forced a 68-year-old man out of his home into a blizzard. You confiscated his phone. You confiscated his money. You knowingly endangered the life of a senior citizen. That is elder abuse in the first degree. I sat in my wheelchair watching the color drain from Connor's face until he looked like a corpse. He was doing the math. He was adding up the years. Fraud, forgery, grand larceny, child endangerment, elder abuse. I cleared my throat. The sound made Connor jump. Do you know what the sentence is for that combo, I asked. Connor did not answer. He could not speak. I asked Alistair earlier, I continued. He says if the judge is in a good mood, you might get 15 years. But seeing as you poisoned a kid and tried to freeze a veteran to death, I think the judge is going to be in a very bad mood. 20 years, Connor, I said. You are going to miss Leo growing up. You are going to miss his graduation. You are going to miss his wedding. By the time you get out, he will be a grown man, and he will know exactly who you are. 20 years, Connor whispered. The number hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He looked at the window. He looked at the door. He looked for a way out. But the only way out was in handcuffs. Get him up, Miller ordered. The 2 officers grabbed Connor by the armpits and hauled him to his feet. He was dead weight. His legs were jelly. The arrogance that had defined him for the last 3 years was gone. The man who had sneered at my clothes and mocked my pension was now a weeping mess of snot and tears. Wait, please, Connor begged as they started to drag him toward the door. We can work this out. Grady, please. I am family. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had looked at my photos and called me a biohazard. You stopped being family the moment you locked that door, I said. They dragged him into the foyer. He fought them then. He started kicking and screaming like a toddler throwing a tantrum. It is not my fault, he screamed, his voice shrill and hysterical. It is society. It is the economy. I had to do it. The system is rigged. I needed the money. He looked at me, his eyes bulging with hate. It is your fault, old man. If you had just died like you were supposed to, none of this would have happened. You are selfish. You are the villain here. You ruined everything. He was blaming the victim. It was the final, desperate act of a narcissist. He could not accept that he was the architect of his own destruction. They dragged him out onto the front porch. The neighborhood had gathered. Mrs. Higgins from across the street was there in her robe. The young couple from next door was watching from their lawn. They all saw Connor Vance, the man who pretended to be a successful day trader, being hauled away like common trash. I did it for us. Connor screamed at the house, hoping Kendra was listening. I did it for this family. But the house was silent. The windows were dark. The officers shoved him into the back of the squad car. He hit his head on the door frame, but he did not stop screaming. He pressed his face against the glass, his breath fogging up the window. He looked at me sitting in the doorway. I sat tall in my wheelchair. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just watched. The image of him in that car was a stark contrast to the man who had opened the door to Alistair just hours before. Then he had been the master of the manor. Now he was just a number in the system. Miller slammed the car door shut. The sound echoed down the street. It was the sound of a book closing. Take him away, Miller said to the driver. The squad car pulled away, lights flashing, illuminating the snow that still covered the lawns. I watched the red taillights fade into the distance. The neighborhood was quiet. The wind rustled the trees. I looked down at my hands. They were still wrapped in bandages from the frostbite, but they were steady. I had taken back my home. I had taken back my dignity. And I had taken out the trash. Miller walked back up the steps. He stood next to me and looked out at the empty street. He is gone, Lieutenant Miller said. Yes, I replied. He is gone. But the war was not over. There was one more casualty inside the house, and she was the one I had to save next. I turned my wheelchair around. I looked into the hallway where my daughter was hiding. Let us go inside, Miller, I said. I have to be a father now. The flashing lights of the squad cars faded into the distance, leaving only the cold white streetlights to illuminate the ruin of my front door. The neighbors had gone back inside, pulling their curtains shut, satisfied with the evening show. Sergeant Miller signaled his men to wait outside. He gave me a nod, a silent look of support, and then he closed what remained of the door, pulling it shut as best he could against the draft. The house was suddenly quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. The air still smelled of the snow from the open door and the sweat of the officers, but underneath that was the lingering scent of the cinnamon oatmeal Connor had made. It was the smell of betrayal. I sat in my wheelchair in the center of the foyer. My hands rested on my knees, which were covered by the wool blanket. I could not feel my legs yet, but I could feel the ghost of the cold that had settled in my bones 3 nights ago. I looked at the staircase. Kendra was still standing there. She had not moved since Connor was dragged away. She looked like a statue made of salt, fragile and ready to crumble at the slightest touch. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and hollow. She was looking at me, but I do not think she was seeing her father. She was seeing the judgment she had been running from. She took a step down, then another. Her legs were shaking so hard I could hear her footsteps vibrating against the wood. When she reached the bottom step, she did not walk toward me. She ran. She threw herself across the floor, sliding on her knees until she collided with my wheelchair. She wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face in the rough wool of the blanket. She began to weep. It was not the polite crying of a funeral. It was a guttural, animalistic sound of total despair. She clutched my legs as if I were the only solid thing left in a world that had liquefied under her feet. "Daddy," she sobbed, her voice muffled by the blanket. "I am sorry. Oh God, I am so sorry. I did not know. I swear I did not know he was this bad. Please forgive me. Please, Daddy." I looked down at the top of her head. I saw the gray hairs that had started to appear in her dark roots. I remembered brushing that hair when she was a little girl, putting it in braids before school. I remembered the feeling of her small hand in mine. My instinct, the instinct of a father who had loved her for 35 years, was to reach down. My hand twitched. I wanted to stroke her hair. I wanted to tell her it was okay. I wanted to tell her that the bad man was gone and we could go back to the way things were. But I stopped my hand in midair. I gripped the armrest of my wheelchair until my knuckles turned white. I could not touch her. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Because if I comforted her now, I would be comforting the child who made a mistake, not the woman who made a choice. And Kendra was a woman. She had made a choice that nearly killed me. I let her cry. I sat there like a stone monument while she poured her guilt onto my lap. I waited until her sobs turned into ragged hiccups. I waited until the silence returned to the room. "Are you done, Kendra?" I asked. My voice was low and steady. It did not have the warmth she was looking for. She looked up at me. Her face was a mess of tears and mascara. She looked terrified. She saw my hand resting on the armrest, and she saw that it had not moved to comfort her. "Daddy," she whispered, reaching for my hand. I was scared. "Connor said you were sick. He said you were dangerous to Leo. I was just trying to protect my son. You have to understand. A mother will do anything to protect her child." I pulled my hand away before she could touch it. "Do not use your son as a shield, Kendra," I said. "Connor used him as a pawn. Do not use him as an excuse." I shifted in my chair. The pain in my lower back was a dull throb, a reminder of the concrete steps I had nearly died on. "You say you were protecting Leo," I continued, "but who was protecting me? I am your father. I am the man who paid for this house. I am the man who paid for your college. I am the man who sat up with you when you had the flu and held your hair while you threw up." Kendra flinched. I know she cried. I know, and I hate myself for it. But Connor was so convincing. He showed me the photos. He showed me the receipt. Photos, I said, cutting her off. A piece of paper. You believed a piece of paper over 30 years of my character. You believed a man you have known for 4 years over the man who raised you. I looked around the foyer. I looked at the spot where Connor had thrown my suitcase. "Let me tell you about that night, Kendra," I said. She shook her head. She did not want to hear it. She wanted to skip to the forgiveness part. "No, Daddy, please," she begged. "You are going to listen," I commanded. My voice boomed in the small space, echoing off the high ceiling. I wheeled myself back a few inches, creating distance between us. When Connor threw me out, it was 10 degrees below zero. The wind was cutting through my clothes like a knife. I did not have my phone. I did not have my wallet. I stood on that porch and I begged you. I looked you in the eye and I asked you to think. Kendra covered her ears with her hands, but I kept talking. I walked down the driveway. The snow was up to my shins. My heart was already struggling. I dragged that suitcase to the street. And do you know what I did before I started walking to the station? Kendra shook her head, sobbing. I turned around, I said. I looked back at the house. I looked back at the living room window. I leaned forward. I wanted her to see my eyes. I wanted her to see the reflection of the snow in them. The lights were still on. I saw the Christmas tree. I saw the warmth. And I saw the curtain move. Kendra froze. Her hands dropped from her ears. Her breath caught in her throat. I saw you, Kendra, I whispered. I saw your silhouette against the light. You were standing there watching me. You watched me drag my suitcase into the darkness. You watched your 68-year-old father walk into a blizzard. Kendra stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She had thought I was walking away. She had not known I looked back. You stood there, I said, my voice rising with the memory of the cold. You stood there safe and warm. You had a choice in that moment. Connor was not holding a gun to your head. The door was not locked from the inside. You could have run out. You could have called out to me. You could have thrown me a blanket. You could have thrown me my keys. But you did nothing I said. You watched me disappear. You pulled the curtain shut, and you went back to your husband, Daddy. Kendra stammered. You thought I would be fine, I snapped. Or maybe you hoped I would not be. Maybe you hoped I would just fade away so you would not have to deal with the conflict. That is not true, she screamed. I love you. Love is action, Kendra, I said. Love is not watching someone die because it is inconvenient to save them. Love is opening the damn door. I sat back in my chair. I felt exhausted. The anger was draining away, leaving behind a deep, profound sadness. I almost died that night, I said softly. If Sergeant Miller had not found me, I would be a frozen corpse in the morgue right now. And you would be in Cabo with the man who killed me spending my money. Kendra lowered her head. She could not look at me anymore. The weight of the truth was crushing her. She realized that she could not hide behind Connor represents villainy. He was the architect, but she was the one who laid the bricks. I am so ashamed, she whispered into the floor. You should be, I said. The room fell silent again. This time it was a final silence. The bridge between us had been burned. It was not just charred, it was gone. So what happens now? She asked, her voice small. Now, I said. Now we face reality. I pointed to the door. This house is sold, Kendra. She looked up confused. But you bought it. Alistair said you bought it. I did, I said. I bought it to save it from Connor. I bought it to prove a point. But I am not keeping it. Kendra represents eyes widened. What do you mean? I cannot live here anymore, I said, looking at the walls. There are too many ghosts. I see Connor in the kitchen. I see you standing at that window. This house is not a home anymore. It is a crime scene. I am selling it, I announced. For real this time. I am putting it on the market tomorrow. But where will we go? Kendra asked, panic rising in her voice. Where will I go? I looked at her. I saw the fear of a child who realizes the safety net is gone. I do not know where you will go, I said. That is up to you. You are kicking me out, she whispered, just like Connor did. No, I said firmly. I said, I am not kicking you out into a blizzard without a coat. I am giving you a notice. You are a grown woman, Kendra. You are 35 years old. You have a degree. You have a brain. It is time you started using them. I reached into the pocket of my blanket and pulled out a checkbook. I wrote a check and tore it out. I held it out to her. This is $5,000, I said. This is enough for a deposit on an apartment, and a month represents rent. It is more than I had when I started out. Kendra looked at the check. She did not take it. Daddy, please. I cannot do this alone. I have Leo. I will pay for Leo represents school, I said. I will set up a trust for his education. He will never want for anything he needs. But you, Kendra, you need to learn how to stand on your own feet. You leaned on me and I carried you. You leaned on Connor and he knocked you down. If you do not learn to stand, you will just find another crutch. She looked at the check. Her hands were shaking. She realized that this was not a negotiation. This was a sentence. Take it, I said. She reached out and took the check. Her fingers brushed mine. Her skin was cold. I love you, Kendra, I said. My voice broke slightly. I will always love you. You are my daughter, but I do not trust you. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Trust is like a mirror, I said. Once it is broken, you can glue it back together, but you will always see the cracks in the reflection. And every time I look at you right now, all I see is that closed curtain. Kendra nodded slowly. She wiped her eyes. She stood up. She looked older than she had 10 minutes ago. She looked like someone who had just lost everything and found only herself in the wreckage. I understand, she whispered. She turned to go upstairs to pack for the second time that day. Kendra, I called out. She stopped and turned back. Leave the keys on the table, I said. She nodded. She walked up the stairs past the spot where Connor had fallen. She walked into her room and closed the door. I sat alone in the foyer. The house was mine again. But as I looked around at the empty space, I realized that victory does not taste sweet. It tastes like ash. I wheeled myself to the window. I pulled back the curtain. I looked out at the street where I had walked that night. The snow was melting. The storm was over. But the winter inside was just beginning. The check I handed Kendra was trembling in her fingers, but the paper I held in my other hand was as steady as a judge sentencing a criminal. It was a single sheet of paper typed on my old typewriter in the study, the only piece of furniture Connor had not defiled. It was not a legal document drafted by Alistair, but it was more binding than anything a court could enforce. It was a contract between a father and a daughter, and the terms were non-negotiable. I wheeled myself over to the small console table in the hallway and placed the paper down. Read it, I said, my voice echoing in the empty space where the police had just dragged her husband away. Kendra wiped her eyes and walked over. She picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the lines and I saw her breath hitch. She looked up at me with a mixture of shock and heartbreak. "You are selling the house," she whispered. "You are really doing it." I looked around at the foyer. I looked at the crown molding I had installed. I looked at the spot on the floor where Connor had laid face down in his own arrogance. I looked at the door that had been slammed in my face. "This is not a house anymore, Kendra," I said quietly. "It is a crime scene. Every corner of this place holds a memory I want to forget. The kitchen is where he poisoned my grandson. The living room is where he mocked me. The porch is where you stood and watched me freeze. I cannot live here. The ghosts are too loud." "But it is our home," she pleaded, tears welling up again. "We can fix it. We can paint over it. We can make new memories." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You cannot paint over betrayal. You cannot renovate trust. This house is poisoned. I am putting it on the market tomorrow morning. Alistair has already prepared the listing. It will be sold to a stranger, someone who does not know the history, someone who can fill it with innocent laughter." "And what about the money?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Connor said you made a profit on the buyback." "I did," I said, "and that profit is going into a trust, but not for you." I pointed to the second paragraph of the document. "The proceeds from the sale of this house along with the insurance payout will be locked in a trust fund for Leo," I explained. "It will pay for his college. It will pay for his medical bills. It will pay for his first car. He will never have to worry about money. But you cannot touch a cent of it." Kendra looked at me, her face pale. "So I get nothing?" she asked. "You get a fresh start," I said, "which is more than you gave me." I wheeled myself closer to her. "I am not doing this to hurt you, Kendra. I am doing this to save you. Connor made you weak. He made you dependent. He made you think that money was the only thing that mattered. If I give you this house or if I give you the money, I am just finishing what he started. I would be crippling you." I looked at the check in her hand. "That $5,000 is all you get," I said. "It is enough for a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in the West End. It is enough to turn the lights on and buy some groceries. After that, you are on your own." "The West End," Kendra whispered. "Daddy, that is across town. It is not a nice neighborhood." "It is a real neighborhood," I countered. "It is full of people who work for a living. People who do not poison their children for a quick buck. You will fit in just fine once you remember how to work." "Work," she repeated the word, feeling foreign on her tongue. "Yes, work," I said, "and I do not mean managing a household. This brings us to the second part of the agreement." I pointed to the bottom of the page where the terms of her employment were listed. "You have a degree in art history," I said. "A degree I paid for. A degree you never used because you married Connor and decided that being a trophy wife was a career path. Well, the trophy case is broken, Kendra." I watched her read the list of acceptable jobs I had written down. Waitress, cashier, stocking clerk, receptionist. "You want me to be a waitress?" she asked, looking up at me with disbelief. "I want you to be useful," I said. "I want you to understand the value of $1. I want you to come home at night with your feet hurting and your hands smelling of sanitizer and know that the money in your pocket is yours. Not Connor represents, not mine, yours." "But how will I take care of Leo?" she asked. "Who will watch him?" "I will pay for his daycare," I said. "That is in the agreement. I will cover his school and his care. But you have to cover the rest. You have to buy his clothes. You have to buy his food. You have to pay the rent." Kendra looked at the paper. She looked at her manicured hands. She had not worked a real day in 5 years. She had lived in a bubble of comfort protected by my money, and then by Connor represents lies. "I do not know if I can do it," she whispered. "I am scared, Daddy." "Good," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You should be scared. Fear is a great motivator. It kept me alive in that blizzard. It will keep you alive now." I looked her dead in the eye. "Connor called you a cow, Kendra. He called you dead weight. He said you were stupid. He said you were useless without him." I saw the anger flash in her eyes, the memory of the slap, the memory of his insults. "Are you going to prove him right?" I asked. "Are you going to crumble because things got hard? Or are you going to prove that you are Grady Wilson represents daughter?" Kendra straightened her spine. It was a small movement, but it was there. "I am not stupid," she said, her voice gaining a little strength. "Then, prove it," I said. "Take the job. Take the apartment. Raise your son to be a man, not a parasite. Show me that the girl I raised is still in there somewhere. Kendra looked at the contract. She looked at the pen lying on the table. It was a cheap ballpoint pen, not the expensive fountain pen Connor had used to sign his life away. She picked it up. Her hand hovered over the paper. This was the moment. She could refuse. She could storm out. She could try to sue me. But she knew deep down that I was right. She knew that the soft life had rotted her soul, and if she wanted to save herself, she had to cut out the rot. She signed, Kendra Vance. The signature was shaky, but it was legible. She put the pen down. I will do it, she said. I will get a job. I will pay the rent. I nodded. I did not smile. This was not a happy occasion. It was a necessary surgery. Go pack your things, I said. The movers will be here in the morning to take the furniture to storage. You need to be out by noon. Kendra looked at the stairs. Can I stay here tonight? She asked. One last night. I shook my head. No, I said. If you stay, you will start to bargain. You will start to make excuses. You need to leave now. Go to a hotel. Use the money I gave you. Start being independent tonight. Kendra looked shocked. She had expected a grace period. But I knew that grace was what got us into this mess. Go, I said, pointing to the door. Kendra nodded slowly. She understood. She turned and walked up the stairs. I listened to her footsteps. I heard the suitcase zipper. I heard her talking softly to Leo, waking him up, telling him they were going on an adventure. 20 minutes later, she came down. She was carrying 2 large suitcases. Leo was walking beside her, holding a stuffed bear, rubbing his sleepy eyes. He looked at me. Grandpa, he said, are you coming? My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to grab him and never let go, but I had to be strong. No Leo. I said, my voice thick with emotion. Grandpa has to stay here and fix some things. You go with Mommy. She is going to take care of you. Leo ran over to me. He hugged my neck. He smelled of sleep and innocence. I love you, Grandpa, he whispered. I love you too, soldier, I said, kissing his forehead. Be good. Listen to your mother. Kendra pulled him away gently. She looked at me one last time. She was wearing her coat, the same coat she had worn to the morgue, but she looked different. The fear was gone, replaced by a grim determination. Thank you, she said, for what I asked, for kicking you out. No, she said, for not letting me give up. She opened the door. The night air was cold, but the storm had passed. The stars were out. She picked up the suitcases. She took Leo Represent's hand. She walked out of the house. I watched them go. I watched them walk down the driveway past the spot where the police cars had been. I watched them get into her car. I watched the taillights fade into the distance. I was alone. The house was empty. The silence was absolute. I wheeled myself to the center of the living room. I looked at the fireplace where I used to roast marshmallows with Kendra. I looked at the wall where her graduation photo used to hang. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and salty. I had saved my daughter. But I had lost my little girl. It was the price of survival. It was the cost of justice. I took a deep breath. I wiped the tear away. I turned my wheelchair toward the kitchen. I had to call Alistair. I had to list the house. I had work to do. But for tonight, I just sat there in the dark, listening to the wind and feeling the warmth of a conscience that was finally clean. The ice has finally melted from the lake outside my window. For 40 years, I dreamed of living here in the Silver Waters complex, watching the sun rise over the ripple of the blue water. I used to drive past these buildings on my way to the fire station and tell myself that one day I would retire here. It took a lifetime of work and a week of hell to make it happen. But I am finally here. I sit on my balcony every morning with a cup of black coffee and I watch the world wake up. It is a quiet life. There are no screaming arguments. There are no slammed doors. There is only the sound of the wind in the trees and the distant hum of the city that used to consume me. My health has returned, although the cold left its mark. I still feel a phantom ache in my fingers when the temperature drops and my lungs are not what they used to be. The doctor says I have the heart of a man half my age, but he does not know how close that heart came to stopping. I walk 3 miles every day along the perimeter of the lake. I nod to the neighbors. They see a distinguished older gentleman enjoying his golden years. They do not know that the man walking past them is a survivor of a domestic war. they do not know that I had to burn my own life to the ground to build this peace. I have furnished this apartment with new things. There is no leather armchair from the old house. There is no dining table where Connor signed his life away. Everything here is clean and modern. It is a fresh start. But on the mantelpiece, I keep a single framed photo. It is not a picture of me, and it is not a picture of Lucille. It is a picture of Leo taken on his first day of school. It is the only connection to the past that I allow myself to keep. I look at it, and I wonder if he remembers the grandfather who used to make him oatmeal, or if he only remembers the shadow of the man who left in the night. Yesterday I found out the answer. I drove my sedan to the west end of the city. It is a gritty neighborhood where the houses stand close together and the sidewalks are cracked. It is the kind of place where people work hard just to stay afloat. I parked in front of a small diner called the Rusty Spoon. Inside, the air smelled of grease and old coffee. I sat in a booth in the back and waited. At 2:00 sharp, the bell above the door chimed. Kendra walked in. She was holding Leo Represents' hand. I almost did not recognize my own daughter. The designer clothes were gone. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail and her face was free of makeup. She looked tired. There were fine lines around her eyes that I had never seen before, but she also looked stronger. The fragility was gone. The desperation was gone. She walked with a purpose. Leo saw me first. He let go of her hand and ran to the booth. He scrambled onto the vinyl seat and hugged me. "Grandpa," he shouted. I held him tight. He felt solid and real. He smelled of soap and rain. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let myself just be a grandfather again. Kendra slid into the booth opposite me. She did not hug me. "We are not there yet." She ordered a coffee and a grilled cheese for Leo. We talked about small things. We talked about Leo Represents school. We talked about the weather. We avoided the name Connor as if it were a curse word. Then Kendra reached into her purse. It was not the Louis Vuitton bag she used to carry. It was a canvas tote. She pulled out a small white envelope and slid it across the table. "What is this?" I asked. "It is for you," she said. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single $50 bill. It was old and wrinkled. "It is from my first paycheck," she said, looking me in the eye. "I got a job at the bookstore down the street. It is not much, but I am the assistant manager now. I worked double shifts last week." I looked at the money. $50. It was a fraction of what I had given her over the years. It was less than the cost of the wine Connor used to drink. But as I held that bill in my hand, I felt a lump form in my throat. This money was clean. It was earned with sweat and time. It was the first honest money Kendra had ever given me. "Thank you," I said. I did not offer to give it back. To give it back would be an insult. It would be telling her that I did not respect her effort. I took the bill and put it in my wallet. I placed it right next to my Driver Represents license. I would never spend it. It was a trophy. It was proof that my daughter was becoming the woman I always hoped she would be. We finished our lunch. I walked them to their car. It was a used Honda, reliable and modest. Kendra buckled Leo into his car seat. She turned to me. "He got 20 years, Dad," she said softly. The lawyer called me. I nodded. "Justice is a slow wheel, but it grinds fine." "Are you happy?" she asked. I looked at her. I looked at the gray sky. "No, Kendra," I said. "I am not happy that my grandson has a father in prison. I am not happy that you had to lose everything to find yourself. But I am at peace, and that is enough." She nodded. She got in the car and drove away. I watched them go until they turned the corner. She was doing it. She was surviving. She was climbing her own mountain, and for the first time, she was doing it without me carrying her. I drove back to my apartment by the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and violet. I poured myself a glass of vintage red wine and sat in my favorite chair. There is one last piece of the story that I have never told anyone, not Miller, not Alistair, not Kendra. I reached into the hidden compartment of my floor safe. I pulled out a small piece of thermal paper. It was a lottery ticket. On the night of the blizzard after I left the house, and before I collapsed in the snow, I stopped at a gas station to buy a bottle of water. I had a few dollars in my pocket that Connor had missed. On a whim, I bought a single ticket. I put it in my pocket and walked into the storm. I checked the numbers 3 days later while I was in the hospital. It is a winner. $2 million. I sat there in the fading light holding the ticket. I could cash it tomorrow. I could buy a yacht. I could travel the world. But I do not need $2 million. I have my pension. I have my lake view. I have my dignity. If I had told Kendra about this ticket 6 months ago, she would have stayed with me for the money. Connor would have tried to kill me faster. Money is gasoline, and my life was already on fire. So I made a choice. I took a pen and wrote a note on the back of the ticket. Then I placed it inside a heavy envelope along with my last will and testament. To Leo Vance, the envelope reads, "To be opened on your 25th birthday. By the time Leo is 25, he will be a man. He will have seen his mother work hard. He will understand the value of struggle. And when he gets this money, he will know how to use it. He will use it to build, not to destroy." I put the envelope back in the safe and locked it. The dial spun with a satisfying click. I walked out to the balcony and leaned against the railing. The city lights were twinkling across the water. Somewhere in a concrete cell, Connor was staring at a blank wall, wondering where it all went wrong. Somewhere in a small apartment, Kendra was reading a bedtime story to her son. And here I was, standing tall. I took a sip of wine. It tasted of oak and earth. People think justice is about revenge. They think it is about making the other person hurt as much as you did. They are wrong. Revenge is a fire that burns everything it touches. I looked out at the calm, dark water. Justice is not revenge, I whispered to the night. Justice is simply putting everything back in its proper place. The criminal in jail, the child in safety, the daughter in reality, and the old man right here where he belongs. I finished my wine and set the glass down. The air was getting cold, but I did not shiver. I was not afraid of the cold anymore. I had survived the winter. Fade to black. My journey taught me that blood makes us relatives, but only loyalty makes us family. For too long, I mistook enabling for loving. I thought that by cushioning every fall, I was being a good father, but I was only feeding the weakness that Connor exploited. I learned that you cannot carry someone who refuses to walk, and you should never set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. True dignity is realizing that walking away isn't an act of abandonment. Sometimes it is the only way to force those you love to finally grow up. If you were in my shoes, would you have given Kendra that final check, or would you have cut ties completely? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and redemption. Until next time, stay strong.